He's going to speak. All right. Good evening and welcome to Minnesota City Schools 1419th regular board meeting. This meeting is now called to order. In closed session, the board gave direction to legal counsel and took action on a contract for interim associate superintendent. All right. Now, if you would please join me in a moment of silence. Please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. And before we go on to the pledge, if anyone is in need of translation services, we do have services available there. If you would like a device, please see, I think it's Maria Maria over there at the desk, and she can provide that for you. All right. And we have students tonight that are joining us for the pledge. And two of our great students from Wilson Elementary. We have Rylan Sparkman. Third grader Rylan holds the position of classroom secretary. She's currently reading 20 words above the first trimester reading fluency benchmark and consistently scores 3s on all varied math assessments. Rylan is the definition of respect and responsibility. She's a peace builder in and out of the classroom and the first to lend a hand to her peers. Following college, Rylan would like to be a nurse or a teacher. Aloysius Cabral, who is the recipient of 2 medals, I see, good job, for perfect SBAC scores, is a 6th grader who's earned honor roll each year from 3rd to 5th grade. He's Wilson's spelling bee winner and a safety patrol captain, and is a member of the student council and a participant in the 10K with a Cop running program. Outside of school, he enjoys creating things out of boxes, reading, and playing video games. Following college, Aloysius would like to be an engineer. Students, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Oh, that's right. Forget to.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, students. If you stay there for a moment, we'll get a picture taken and a certificate. At this time, I want to call your attention to the fact that if you wish to address the board during the period for public comment on a subject not on agenda, you must complete a public presentation request card and submit it to the board president, to me, just bring it over here, prior to the public comment period. Only those who have submitted cards will be called upon to speak, and no cards will be accepted after the period begins. So you'll find the cards in the lobby, and each person who wishes to address the board must fill out a card. Thank you. All right. All right, let's go take a picture down here.
Good evening, and thank you for coming out this evening. It is my honor and my privilege to continue on with some student recognitions. We've had quite a few this evening. How many were here today earlier for the SBAC? All right, so we've got a couple in the house. That's wonderful. All right, I'd like to first start with a student in 4th grade. It comes from Burbank Elementary School. Her name is Brianna Garcia, showcasing the trait of respect. And tonight we're going to have the presenter as Althena Bateman, her teacher.
So good evening. My name is Aletha Bateman. I am Brianna's teacher at Burbank School. I want to thank her family and our principal for being here tonight. The first week of school, this young lady just kind of shined out to me as a model example of respect. But then I thought, okay, first week, we'll continue on, and sometimes a little bit more challenges. But she kept going, and every single day she does what our character trait, kind of the motto is she treats herself the way that she wants to be treated. She treats her teammates that way. She treats myself that way. Any other adult or student she sees on campus, always with a smile on her face, doing her best job, and very kindly pointing out my mistakes when I make them, which I make them daily. So I really want to recognize her for respect. Again, she is a model example, and she will turn into an adult I know that will show respect wherever she goes. So I just want to thank you for your hard work. I want you to keep it up. I want to thank her family for being here and their support, and also just having this time to recognize you.
All right, our next student is an 8th grade student from Hanshaw Middle School, showcasing the trait of initiative. The more initiative one shows as a student and as a teacher and as a leader, it certainly affects the schools and how well we perform and how well our district as a whole performs. So I'd like to introduce Chrissy Simpkins. She's an 8th grader, and the presenter is Devon Greenwich, which is a resource specialist, and Lori Jonas, the principal.
And I wanted to start out by saying that Chrissy is a student of mine. I also teach leadership at Hanshaw, and she is one of our leadership students. But Chrissy is a role model for our school. I nominated her regarding initiative, but really she could have filled so many of our character traits. So I wanted to share with you what I had written. Chrissy is a model student who goes out of her way to do the right thing. She offers help to her teachers when she sees a need. She assists students who are struggling without being asked, and she makes sure that each task she does is done to the best of her ability. Chrissy also has a tremendous heart, is kind to all, and treats all students and staff with the respect that they deserve. And it's just a joy to have her in class. This is my second year with her as her leadership teacher, and she just brings a smile to my day. But she's just so kind, and if she sees that something is needed, she's there with a willing hand, and love having her in class.
That's it. They're not here. All right. Well, thank you again for coming out today and in support of our students, and thank you, students, for showing good character traits and academic performance. I'm gonna go.
Well, we have some exciting things going on at Modesto City Schools, and we want you to share in our recognition and celebration of our amazing staff and students. I'd like to turn it over to the superintendent now, who has some additional announcements.
Wonderful, thank you. I'd like to call up Danielle Hinkle and Roger Orth, please, to be acknowledged. Please, come up here. Thank you. First, I want to thank you for representing, you two are representing the 200 managers here in Modesto City Schools, recognizing you are on the board of directors for the MCS manager, so thank you for taking your time out this evening. I think it's very important. Center to our success as a district is leadership, and leadership is certainly found in and amongst all of our managers here within Modesto City Schools. Later this evening, the Board of Education will be provided a resolution which is just acknowledging the week of the school administrator, which is coming up in October. I believe it starts October 6th. And really the purpose of this resolution is just to stop and to recognize administrators as a whole. And administrators is really a large umbrella for all the managers within our school district, from superintendent to the cabinet, to classified, to assistant principals, to principals, everyone representing folks in a leadership role. So just real quickly, I want to personally thank you and the other 200 that are behind you for the work that you do, not only on behalf of myself, but also the Board of Education, because without you, we wouldn't be where we're at, and certainly you're vital. Modesto City Schools is in an exciting time. We are looking forward to really shifting and becoming very focused in this next 5 months as we write goals and we figure out how we're going to measure those goals, and we get a clear path. And that path is wonderful, but we're not going to realize our dreams and we're not going to realize our goals without strong leadership, and the two of you represent that. So with that, I thank you for your time and your service, and those behind you.
Thank you. Thank you to all our administrators. Thank you.
Hello. Oh, I just want to make sure it's on. Good evening, everyone. I'm Danielle Hinkle, Senior Director, Educational Services. And to President Newman and the members of the Board of Education and Superintendent Dr. Noguchi and Cabinet, I want to thank you on behalf of not only the MCS managers, but also all of our certificated site and district managers for the recognition. We certainly appreciate the support. And we have a lot of very hardworking administrators who every day do everything in their power to put students first. And so we certainly appreciate the recognition this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Roger Orr, Senior Director of Maintenance and Operations. I want to thank you, Dr. Noguchi, for the introduction. And thank you, Board President and School Board, for your support. And I want to also extend a thank you on behalf of all the managers for bringing our team together and keeping our team together. And we all have challenges, but these, like you said, these are very exciting times. The challenges don't really seem like challenges when you're part of a great team and you work with selfless people that have their eye on the ball. And having your eye on the ball is keeping your eye on the kids. And that's the group I'm lucky enough to work around. And I feel blessed to work around the people I work around and have for many years in this district. So like I hear a lot of managers say in my travels, it doesn't feel like work if you love what you're doing. So again, thank you very much for all your support for our managers. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. All right, this takes us down to the approval of the consent agenda, and Trustee Walker would like to have an item moved to discussion. Can you identify that?
Yeah, I'd like to have item E6 moved from consent to discussion.
All right. So we'll move that item. We'll talk about where, but I'm looking then. So is there anyone who has any other questions on anyone on the board who has any other questions on the approval of the consent agenda or the consent?
I'll move approval.
Oh, I do
Well,
have a
actually, we
comment.
need to go to the public first.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
And so E6 is what it was?
E6.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to make a comment or has a question regarding anything on the consent agenda? Seeing none, it'll come back to the board. And you'd like to make a motion, Trustee Marks?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
All right. Is there a second?
I'd actually like to make a comment before we approve.
Sure.
On item C4, a technology report, and I'm not saying yes, but what I want to do is encourage my fellow board members as we go through this technology review at the district level, that there's a parallel effort going on at the board level, because the existing district technology plan is extraordinarily dated, and based on math, I believe Trustee Marks is the only one that's here that was part of that, and nobody here has had input, and it needs to be updated as well with at least our direction and reflection.
All right. Is there a second for trustee's motion for approval of the consent agenda minus E6, which we'll do in discussion? It's looking all right. It's been seconded by Trustee Brown. All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. This takes us on to the next item on the agenda, which is the approval of the order of discussion action items. Since we moved E6 out of consent, we need to put it in discussion. How about we put it, would you like to have it maybe between 9 and 10?
That's fine with me.
Okay. E6, and so it would be 9A. So with the adjustment that E6 would now be 9A, agenda item B, 9A. Are there any other questions or comments from the board regarding the order of discussion action items? Seeing none, are there any comments or questions from the audience? Seeing none, I'm looking back to the board for a motion for approval of the consent agenda, or the approval of the order of discussion action items with that adjustment. A motion?
I'll move approval.
Okay, it has been moved by Trustee Marks and seconded by Trustee West. All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, board. This takes us to the period for public presentations. Before we begin, I want to just make a brief statement. Thank you for attending tonight's meeting. Your attendance shows your interest in our schools, and for that we thank you. The period for public comment is limited to 30 minutes. Time will be allotted equally to individuals based on the number of request cards submitted. The maximum time for any one speaker is 3 minutes. I also want to remind you that if you wish to make a complaint against a specific district employee, you should follow the district's personnel complaint procedure. Copies of that procedure are available in the lobby, as are agenda copies, which outline the procedures we will observe during the period for public comment. The right to address the board does not exempt the speaker from any potential liability for defamation. Before I ask tonight's speakers to address the board, I want to clarify that we may not engage in any discussion on the topic that will be raised, because we are legally obligated to provide the public with advance notice about topics that the board will be discussing. Agendas are intended to inform the public about all topics of discussion and action. So anyone interested in a particular subject on the agenda may attend the meeting and address the board. While we cannot engage in discussion on items not on the agenda, I assure you that we will listen attentively to your comments. Again, I thank you for joining us tonight. All right, I have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards tonight. And I ask each speaker when they're called to come to the podium and address the board. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. So Amanda Soria. Good evening.
Good evening. Can I have some water?
There we go. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amanda Joanne Soria. I'd like to first talk about the proposal consent agenda D. Consent. D1, approval of out of the state Enochs High School yearbook trip to Columbia University, New York City. I think we should think about Enochs Safety first, and the reason why I say that is I used to work at Enochs, and there's a lot of issues that have not been fixed. We've had fights in the past. We've had kids run in cafeterias, and nutritionists like us that have not been trained try to stop fights that we shouldn't have to, and I used to sub as a campus supervisor, but I'm going to hand this over to my husband. And also, too, we do not have a phone at our other snack bar. And if there's something that happens, we don't have nothing to communicate with the office, the principal, campus supervisors. They need to have walkie-talkies to let us communicate. Thank you.
Okay. Raul Soria, we are La Raza Family Union. Just real quick, on protocols and issues that have been raised, it's been about 1.5 years now since Amanda Soria has been terminated from Modesto City Schools. Prior to that, we have submitted a formal written complaint, followed the procedures that are in place, and it's been over a year and a half, and we still have not been informed on the outcome of that. And that is while Amanda Sawyer was still an employee of Modesto City Schools. So I just wanted that to go on record. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. This takes us to Steve Collins. Welcome back, Mr. Collins, since you were a trustee here for many years.
A number of familiar faces around here, including Roger, who I learned earlier tonight is a 2-year veteran of the MJC Pirates football team, so we're thankful for that. I'm here tonight with Dr. Jennifer Zealot, who's the Vice President for Instruction of MJC, and we'll be as brief as we possibly can, but we're very happy about some things. On the Sunday of Father's Day this past year.
Can you adjust your microphone? We're not sure we're hearing you.
Oh.
There we go.
Well, maybe I should just move closer to it.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. On Sunday of Father's Day Sunday of this year, the entire college neighborhood was awakened by a huge explosion in the pool area of Modesto Junior College. That explosion made the pool totally inoperable, damaged at least 2 other of the nearby facilities, and created a major problem for us. We had aquatic sports. We had community groups that swam in our pool. We had a whole swim program that was part of our curriculum, and we did not know what was going to happen to save those programs. And what happened to help save those programs in large part was Modesto City Schools, because you stepped in and made yourselves available and made your support available, and that saved all of those operations. So I want to thank particularly Dwayne Waltersdorf, Sherry Jenkins and Roger Orth, La Loma Junior High, Bayer High School, Johansson High School, Downey High School, and Modesto High for really being part of a community that supports your local community college. Jennifer?
Thank you.
I also want to add my thanks to that of President Collins. On Saturday night at the football game, we had Community Partner Appreciation Night, and Modesto City Schools was very well represented by Dwayne Waltersdorf and Roger Orth. Once a pirate, always a pirate, right, Roger? And I expressed at the time that when we deal with our students, we recognize that it takes a village to make things happen. And as we serve the community from our angle and you serve the community from your angle, sometimes we need to join efforts to make sure that we support each other. And I think as time goes forward, we're going to realize that there are more and more ways that we can intertwine our efforts so that our students come through a seamless educational path. And this was a perfect example of a time when we were in crisis and in need. And we're very grateful that you stepped in to help us serve our students in a very fine way. So thank you very much, and thank you especially to one of the managers and 2 of the managers, actually they're both managers, that you honored this evening. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming and sharing that. We really appreciate that. Yay. And we're looking forward to the repair of the pool, and we're glad no one was injured. And as one who heard that noise, I'm just glad no one was there. So thank you. Thank you for coming tonight and sharing that. Debbie Barrera. Good evening.
Good evening. As always, I come as the bearer of bad news, but hopefully our voices are somewhat being heard. Before I get started, I wanted to pass these out. So can you stop the clock for a minute? My topic tonight is school safety, constitutional rights, and you guys finally put it on print. So if you don't mind passing them, starting with Dr. Noguchi all the way to Chad. Thank you, Mark. And Dr. Noguchi, I would like you to see these. Then we'd like those back. Thank you. Okay. Good evening, Debbie Barrera with We Are La Raza Parents Union. I come before this governing board because I have had tomorrow with the visit, I have had and I will be visiting 3 school sites. Johansson, where we had one of your campus officers overly use force to a minor, which caused injuries to her body. 260 pounds versus 120 pounds, adult versus child, is going to be called child abuse. Parents had to seek medical care. Right there. On Friday, community went to James Marshall, where child abuse has been proven at that site. Let's not forget Little Landon Hill, 3rd grader. Regardless of the programs, abuse is abuse. Negligence is happening to our preschoolers. Several families are voicing concerns and complaints on that site. Mike Henderson, and I'll quote, "Ms. Barrera, are you seeking out these families?" Unquote. I wouldn't have to seek them out or speak out on their behalfs if the district is well aware that there are issues. Do your job. Let's not forget, it has been We Are La Raza Parents Union long ago, and all we do is seek justice. Had it not been for us, Little Landon would have never received his justice. Under state and federal courts, I can continue climbing if I need to. Our children have constitutional rights. And you guys finally put them in print in July of this year. Thank you. Dr. Noguchi, when we met with you with We Are La Raza, you respectfully asked us not to talk about the past. We complied. Community is now asking this district to comply and to report what is currently happening at our school sites: child abuse, child endangerment, and child neglect. Principals in this district don't get reprimanded, they get promoted to senior district. What message are you sending to the community and the parents? The parents have no voice and they have no choice. But I clearly am going to state poor quality of service. I am going on record to say, let's not forget why we had to take this district to federal courts. We have no problem going to state and local courts. Mr. Mike Henderson, how can parents and community trust you if you turned a blind eye and a deaf ear in the past? A violation is a violation. Do your job. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Sina.
Hi, I'm going to have Debbie speak for me.
Each speaker can only get 3 minutes. Her time has expired. But if you would like to say something, you're more than welcome to.
Well, what she wants to say is the campus officers...
Ms. Barrera, your time is expired, but hers has not. So I'm happy to hear what Ms. Sina has to say.
Okay, I sent my daughter to school without bruises. She came home bruised up from the security guard at school. I had
What you're asking for is female campus officers.
That's what I want. I want female campus security guards there.
Would you like to see Amy?
I just feel that she wasn't taken care of that day. She shouldn't have came home with bruises because I didn't send her to school like that. I feel that if I had sent her to school that way, I would have had social services at my house pulling her out.
No police officers were called?
No police officers were called
To investigate.
to investigate the situation.
So you want female officers on those campuses?
I would like female guards or campus guards there. Officers there.
All right.
And Karen has pictures if you'd like to see.
If you want to send those up to the board, that'd be fine.
Pass them around. What she's simply saying is we need female officers. We have 7 male.
Ms.
and
Barrera, this is Ms. Sina's time.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
That's what she's just saying what I wanted to say. I would like female campus officers there instead of males to control the situations when it's females, not a male getting on top of a little girl.
This is the student in question. So when I said in my speech 260 pounds versus 120 pounds, it's an uneven fight.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'd like our pictures back, please.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to take them that way.
Sure.
This way, and I'll drop them back off.
Thank you. Juan or Valerie?
Again, I'm going to stand with the family.
Hello, I am Juan Ceja with La Raza Parent Union. I just want to be able to address the safety that is going on in James Marshall. These past weeks, we've been experiencing some abuse on my 5-year-old autistic son, and it is really painful to be able to absorb that. I should feel safe and with all more like peacefulness in my heart to be able to send my son to school there, but yet up until this day I still don't. It is really hard for me to be able to be receiving my autistic son that cannot be able to explain to me or tell me who is doing this to him, but yet only be able to tell me that it's a teacher that is addressing this to him, that is leaving squeeze marks on his shoulder. Just a couple days ago he came home and he had a busted lip, and all he can tell me is just the teacher did it. I don't find that right. I should feel really safe to be able to send my son there in James Marshall, and I really don't. It's really hurtful that I've been getting the run around me and mom. We get sent to the principal. Every time we go to the principal, we can never get an appointment with him. He's always busy. We've been adjusted with the vice principal. She knew what went on the first time. Nothing happened for a week. We made a police report. The second time with the lip, we made a police report. Couldn't get an answer from the principal. It feels like it just needs to get to a far extent for our voice to be able to be heard, and it shouldn't be that way. We should be able to feel as a parent that we can be able to say whatever we need to say about our child, since they can't speak for themselves, and be able to be heard from it. We get sent from child welfare to special education, and we're just getting the run on every time, and it makes it really hard as a parent to be able to protect our own child for that.
Hi, good evening. I'm Valerie Ceja, the parent of Juan Ceja. I just wanted to say, as a parent, I thought I had rights on where my son was happy, where he was safe, and where it was peaceful for him. I had him at Garrison Elementary in the autism program there. I was happy until I got a transition from Samora, the manager of the program. She sent my son to James Marshall because it was more convenient in my area, which I didn't want to send him, knowing the history of the school. No offense, but I liked him where he was at, where he was happy. And now that I send him to James Marshall, these things are going on. They're never addressed, like one parent did say. If I would have sent him to school with those marks, they would have called CPS on me right away. So at the same time, if you guys do that, I'd expect you guys to do something about what was done in the school. Like my husband said, he can't talk. That hurts me. And if only I had those rights like you guys say I do, I would like to choose a different school, or the school that I had for my son, and for him to stay there, because his sister attends Garrison anyways. I did all I could to keep them together, and yet they were separated. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say one more thing, if I could. I just want to say thank you to Debbie. Because of her, I feel like my voice is being heard.
Thank you. All right. Thank you.
It's gone on record. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for following the protocol and addressing the board, and for taking the time to share your views and come tonight to talk to us about issues. We appreciate it. All right. This takes us on to the first item on agenda, B1, which is the student representative to the board report. And you may have noticed that our own Shelby Benz is not here tonight. She is playing. She is a volleyball player, and there is a heated match against Pittman, Modesto High versus Pittman. And so we just want to root for Modesto City Schools in that game and hope that we have victory. And so Shelby's a star volleyball player, so she can't be with us tonight. Pittman was like state champion, so this is quite a rivalry. So let's go on to B2 and Mr. Burton. Good evening.
Good evening, President Newman, Superintendent Noguchi, Cabinet, and Board of Trustees. You may have heard that MTA is involved with another group in the community these days, the Modesto teachers, or Modesto students first. Sorry for the slip there, but you know, when you represent teachers, it just kind of comes out. This Saturday, we're going to be co-hosting, kind of spearheading on behalf of the Modesto Students First Committee, covering bonds D and E, a precinct walk starting at the MTA office at 8 o'clock in the morning and culminating at Downey Park with a taco truck lunch later on that late morning or early afternoon. I would like to invite all of you to join us because it's going to be where all the cool kids are hanging out on Saturday. And any members of the community who have free time and would like to join us, this is a community-wide event that we are in support of. So thank you very much.
Thank you, MT. What time are you guys starting on Saturday?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock. And what time do you expect it to end? I have a question from Trustee.
It takes roughly an hour and a half, 2 hours to walk a single precinct. So we advertise the event from 8 to 12, realizing that there are going to be people finished before 12, but not everybody starts at 8. So
all right.
I believe the taco truck lunch has been scheduled to start 10:45-ish, I think.
Great. Thank you. And thank you to MTA for that support and organizing that. Thank you. All right. The California School Employees Association report. Don, Mr. Corgett, please come up.
Good evening, Board President, Trustees, Superintendent, and Cabinet. I just wanted to say CCSA also is in support of Measure D and E. And we all know we have a few schools over 100 years old in our district, and almost all of them are over 50 years as far as the junior highs and elementaries. So it's a really a dire need for our community to support these two measures. And CSCA is happy to be in support, and we encourage our members to do likewise. Also, we've scheduled our first negotiation session for November 20th, and we're looking forward to a productive and meaningful session. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Corgett. All right. This takes us to the public hearing regarding the Spire Vanguard College Preparatory Academy renewal charter petition. And I'd like to turn the matter over to our legal counsel, Bill Schutz.
Hey, good evening. Thank you, President Newman, good evening, Board. This is about the public hearing regarding the Spire Vanguard College Preparatory Academy renewal petition that was submitted to the district seeking renewal for a 5-year term that would start July 1st, 2019. The board may recall that last year you authorized their mature revision of their charter to change locations to their Sunset Avenue location where they're sharing that with Spire University. The renewal petition was received by the board at its September 10th meeting to start the renewal petition process. Tonight's public hearing is required by the Education Code so the board may consider the level of support for the renewal charter petition by teachers, other employees, and parents of the district. This public hearing is an information item only, and the determination of whether the board will approve the renewal petition will be agendized for action at a future board meeting. I understand that representatives from Spire are here this evening and wish to address the board regarding their renewal petition. I understand they've been allotted up to 15 minutes for that purpose. After a hearing from the petitioners, the board will hear any public comment regarding the renewal petition. So with that, I'll turn things back over to you, President Newman. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Schutz. And just to clarify, do I need to close the board meeting and open a public hearing procedurally?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to close the regular board meeting of Modesto City Schools and open the public hearing. And so the first thing I'd like to do is hear from the applicant, if there's someone that is here from Aspire. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. President Newman, Dr. Noguchi, board members, appreciate you having us here tonight. Like he said, we had been here last year great to be back again. We had our material revision for our move, so we moved from out in Empire out to the old SOS Club out here on Sunset. So we're excited to be in our new facility. We've got a few pictures for you guys to see what's going on and how things are going so far. But yeah, just really important, I think, just to get a chance to be part of this process. It's a great thing that we are able to engage. Aspire Public Schools has been around for 20 years, so we're not new to the experience of coming before boards every 5 years to make sure we're following what we need to and making sure we're explaining exactly what our process and our protocols are as a school. And then I'm not sure if I way to advance. Thank you. Let's see if I can make it work now. Aha. All right, so as an organization, our mission and vision has always been to operate small schools in high-quality charter areas or neighborhoods that need us. So I would say we don't open schools in Manhattan Beach, we don't open schools in Marin, we don't open schools in Beverly Hills because they don't need us. And so our goal is to really serve underserved communities where students are at high need. We work very hard to develop effective educators through our teacher professional development. We also share successful practices with our district partners and other partners in the charter world. And so we've been working really closely lately with the County Office of Ed and the district around our LCAP work. And we've really learned a lot, both from Modesto City and from Stanislaus County, on how to do better with charters. That's something that, to be honest, charter schools haven't engaged with well in the past. And so we're really trying to be good learners with you all through that. And the other part is just to catalyze improvement in school change in general in the public school sector. So a little bit about us. I mean, we have been known as one of the highest performing low-income school districts in the nation. We serve 40 schools, 36 in California. When we had a void of data for a while before the SBAC data came around, it was difficult to really do renewals and really talk about how well we are doing. Now that we have that data, we're able to show 2, 3, 4 year longitudinal data as well. So we'll be able to put that as part of our presentation today. College for Certain is the Aspire motto across all of our schools, and that means not that we're selecting students that we deem college ready. We're open enrollment, no tuition, absolutely no enrollment criteria, and we use a lottery system that's very blind, and we just pick the first on the list that comes up in an electronic lottery. But our mission for every student is to complete 100% A through G requirements and earn a 4-year college admissions before they're allowed to graduate from high school. Mr. Weiler, our principal, will tell you a little bit more about the specific program at Vanguard, but just know that we are really here to serve the students of Modesto, and we're really excited about the new location and serving more students in the area of the old SOS Club. And then lastly, again, we receive very minimal private funding for our schools, and it's almost 100% public dollars that we receive as part of ADA, just like any other school, and there are no costs or tuition for our students. So this past year, we graduated our largest graduating class ever, and this isn't Vanguard, this is the entire organization. So we had 3,434 high school graduates, of which nearly 3,000 matriculated into a 4-year university. Many of those 1,400 that did not matriculate into a 2-year university. And especially in the Central Valley, San Joaquin Delta College is a big recipient of students in Stockton, and Modesto Junior College is a big recipient of our students here in the Modesto area. So we also work really closely with the local junior college system. We've been in here in Modesto for 9 years now. We have 3 schools in the Modesto area. There's Summit Academy, which is on Coffee Road, and then we have University Charter School, who has moved onto the same site as Vanguard at the Sunset location. So we have 2 co-located schools there right off the freeway. So our new facility, I'll share a little bit about that. So if you've ever been to the old SOS Club, I got to tour it before we took it over, and we went down in the basement where there was pictures of Muhammad Ali and Frank Sinatra, and there was pleather seats everywhere, and it was really a cool kind of retro place. And so we really tried to keep some of the architecture and feel. We didn't tear it down and start from scratch. We did a lot of remodels. It's amazing if you get a chance to tour, and we invite you all to tour. Some of the old racquetball courts are classrooms now, and you wouldn't recognize what they were. And some areas we use some of the existing facilities like garage doors in the makerspace. So you roll up the garage door and you can see the classroom, and it's going to have computer technology kind of makerspace set up. So it's going to be a really exciting facility. It's still partially under construction. There's a whole section that's quarantined off if you drive by, and we're still working on making sure and getting it ready. But we've gotten all the use permits for the areas that we're utilizing, and it's beautiful already, and it's going to be even more beautiful once it's done. So again, open invite if you'd like to come visit and tour the school. And then for Vanguard College Preparatory Academy, here's just some statistics about our school. So currently we have 406 students, of which 65% are Latino, 5% African American, and 56% free and reduced lunch. That number is still in flux because we're still collecting applications. I think they're due October 3rd is the cutoff date. So we anticipate that it'll get closer to 60% once we're all said and done. We have 12% special education, and 12% of our students are second language learners. So very much mirroring the demographics of our neighborhood and the population of Modesto City Schools in toto. So I'd love to get a chance to introduce our principal, Jacob Wheeler. You can come up and talk a little bit more about the site and the program of the school specifically.
Good evening. Before I say any more, I just want to acknowledge what an honor it is to be joining with all of you in working to serve the young people of our extraordinary community. So thank you for the work you do and for making it possible for us to do our work. As you can see here, I'm very delighted to be starting my 8th year at Spire Vanguard College Prep. This is my first year serving as the principal. I'm from the Midwest. I went to school Notre Dame and then got my master's degree just up the road at UOP. And I recently completed the Spire Central Valley Principal Residency Program to prepare me for what I get to do now. I'm thrilled to tell you about some of the exciting stuff we're doing at our school. Most notably, we employ what's called an early college model. And that means that all of our students, by the time they complete 12th grade, have real life exposure to university, to college level coursework. Our standard graduation requirement is that our students complete 5 college courses by the time they're done. And that allows us to give them a running start into the work that they do as they move on to college for certain. It also gives us the chance to work very closely with some key partners, most notably Modesto Junior College. And just a couple days ago, last week, I had a really exciting meeting with some folks from MJC about some expanding partnerships that we want to do. So we also employ an intensive academic counseling model, and in the business, that's actually called intrusive counseling, intrusive in a good way. It means that we don't wait for students to come to us and say, I'd like to apply to college. It means we go actively to our students. We collect data about our students. We know what colleges and universities will be the best fit for them. So we proudly employ the intrusive academic counseling model. We talk a lot about social emotional learning. Recently, there's research out that says for adults, the typical adult can articulate 3 different emotions. And a typical well-functioning adult needs to be able to articulate 30 emotions. So we are beginning with our young people. You can see our mood meter up there. And multiple times a day, we check in with them. And we try to build some language and some awareness in them about what it means to be emotionally fluent, because we see this as a foundation for successful academic work. We're early adopters for science program, NGSS. We're working on Eureka Math, which you'll see has had helped us to be really successful with some of our recent math scores. And we are thrilled about Makerspace coming soon. And we're going to combine some engineering and some STEM work and some computer science. We've got some big visions, and surely we'll be coming back soon to report on all of that. This is some data that you may have seen if you've taken a look at some of our material revisions or our LCAP. This is from the 2016-2017 school year. I'll give you a bit of background in slides to come, but we're proud of the work that we did in 16-17, and you can see how we did relative to some of the other schools. Keep in mind that we are combined middle school and high school. So as you sort of check us out towards Modesto High and Grace Davis, keep in mind that in 17 and 18, I've disaggregated it here for you, our scores rose. They rose relative to our scores in 16-17 and relative to some local schools. Some more of a narrative for you to help put those 16-17 numbers into context. We welcomed a large influx of new students in that school year. And we found, not surprisingly, that for students who hadn't been with us from kindergarten, from our feeder schools, that we're a bit of a different feel by design. And it takes a bit of time for students to acclimate and for us to really onboard them into our program. And we're really proud, we're exhilarated actually about the growth we experienced between 16-17 and 17-18. And then this is again disaggregated for our 11th grade scores. So the previous one was for our middle school scores. We are experiencing year to date a high attendance rate, low suspension rate. We've implemented a Pride program, which is focusing on positive youth development and intervention. We have over 100 students participating in our Key Club. Of a 3-state cluster, we are regularly noted as one of the most active and robust Key Clubs, and that's particularly extraordinary because of our, by design, small size. We're inaugurating a Hispanic Youth Leadership Conference this year because we want to be particularly responsive to the community that we serve and to our largest demographic. And we're expanding our athletic programs. I've been so excited to tell you about this photograph. This is our cross-country team. I think this really represents what we're trying to do as a school. During one of their practice runs, they picked up trash along the Tuolumne River Trail, which is now part of our new community. And I just feel like this photograph represents, we want to be contributors to our new community. We want to be members of that community. We want to be good neighbors, and we want to be allies. We're working hard to engage our families. You'll hear in a moment from Mr. Omero Mejia, our community outreach manager. We've invested in that. We have a full-time person working on that. We have a full-time person working on our school culture and climate. I am actively working more than ever before on being involved with our parent group and getting some really positive responses from that. That's one of the things as principal that's really important to me, is making sure parent voices are heard. And we're also really investing in our employees, in our teachers in particular. We have a robust coaching model. I myself came up through our teacher pipeline, and as a principal, I'm receiving robust coaching every week in school leadership. So we're really proud of the growth that we see, not only our young people making, but our adult colleagues. And if you're following along in the paper format, you'll see we're calling an audible here. I'm really proud to introduce to you Isabela Mendoza, the young lady we had in our paper report. Isn't here for an awesome reason. She's at MJC right now, and her professor wouldn't let her be here because she's got a really important presentation to do in her psychology class. So I think that's a pretty good reason to call an audible, and we have a great backup. I'd like to introduce you to Bella.
It was really tall. Okay. Hello, my name is Isabela Mendoza. I am 15 years old and in the 10th grade. I've been with Spire since I was in kindergarten, as my older brother was a student at Summit Charter Academy in Ceres. I find the work throughout all of my classes to both be challenging and interesting. For example, in my English class, we take the first 5 to 10 minutes of class to take notes while listening to NPR. This allows me to not only be aware of what is happening around the world, but to also practice my note-taking and short-term memory skills. Last year, one of my favorite projects I did was a Genius Hour project in biology. I enjoyed this project because of the creative freedom we were given. We created a question that related to biology and presented our findings in a format of our choosing, such as a poster board, 3D model, children's book, or in my case, a script. Alongside my high school classes, since the spring of this year, I have taken Healthful Living and Music Appreciation as online classes through MJC. I like taking MJC courses because I'm able to complete my general education college courses while I'm in high school at a cheaper cost than if I were to complete them at a university. As an aspiring psychologist and or journalist, I plan on taking writing and psychology courses in the next 2.5 years. The counselor at Vanguard will help me select the appropriate classes to achieve my goals. At Vanguard, I serve as Key Club's president, which is an international student-led volunteer program through Kiwanis. Key Club is important to me because I am able to practice my leadership skills while also helping my community. Some organizations we have partnered with include the Modesto Gospel Mission, the Salvation Army, Society for Disabilities, the Pediatric Trauma Program, UNICEF, and many, many more. The adults at Vanguard not only care about the students' education, but they also care about us as people. I have known many of the staff members for almost 10 years, and they always ask how my family is and how I am doing. Another thing, a lot of the staff members speak Spanish as well, and as a large majority of our students are Hispanic, it's a great way to communicate with them. With the help of the Vanguard staff after graduating, I hope to attend UCLA, UC Berkeley, or Boston University and earn a degree in psychology or journalism.
Thank you, Isabella.
Thanks very much. You make us proud. To sort of wrap up our presentation, I'd like to also introduce you to Mr. Omeda Mejia to let you know a little bit about what we're doing to be good members of our community.
Good evening.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Familiar faces, of course. I wanted to just say a few words. They gave me probably the easiest thing. I've been a part of this community for a long time. I graduated from Modesto City Schools. But one of the things that I think I was one of the reasons why I chose Vanguard and wanted to kind of get involved is college changed my life. MJC changed my life. And I love Spire's model of college for certain. And I think we mean that. Last year, I'll just share this example. I didn't have it in my notes, but my heart spoke today. We had a student that was a DACA that was going to get legalized, and he had to travel outside the country. And we went and jumped hoops through this student for him to leave and then come back and be able to graduate in time. And that's what I think speaks highly of what we do at Vanguard. We care for each student, and we do whatever it will take to get him to graduate and succeed. And so I'm super proud. He is going to go to the armed forces, to the Navy. And I'm super, super excited to share. I was going to share a bunch of stuff more, but I thought that was it really spoke to me. And we work with this family, single dad, kind of raising a couple boys. So that's really why I'm there. And I believe college can change your life. And that's why I really believe. And I think Bell and all the families are really not strangers. They're like family. Everybody knows each other. I remember Jared that came in one morning and just really he was teary-eyed when he came in. I knew something was going on, and we basically said he can't be going to class. And so we immediately took him to the mental health counselor, and he stayed with us in the front office until he got better. So that's really I feel like that's really the compassion that we have for our students. So anyways, I wanted to just say why I'm working for Vanguard. The other thing is Mr. Weiler shared that we have 95% attendance rate, and part of that is because we're intentional about what we do with families. So part of my role there is I call families. I call families that they're missing 1 or 2 days to check in with them to see what they need. What do they need to get their students to school? I also do home visits. So that's part of my role with them, to go visit them. And so attendance rate is not like by accident. I think we need to be on top of families, because you hear all kinds of different reasons why they're not making it to school. So I really, really enjoyed doing that. Also, one of the things I did part of my summer was I did door knocks. I do a lot of community outreach. I see some familiar faces here. But I basically I went down each door next to the school, and I knocked on every single door, introduced ourselves, and also asked them, what do you need? We're coming to your school. We're going to have lots of traffic. We're going to have lots of things. What do you need? So how can we be good neighbors? And actually, that's how also some of the folks heard about our school. But most importantly, one good example, we have a family that lives across the street that works night shifts. So we took her some cones so we can actually block her parking space in the morning. But I wouldn't have known that if I wasn't going to knock on their door and figuring out ways to be good neighbors. And of course, we're working with the police department, trying to get a good route. We're trying to do the best that we can. And I actually canvass all the neighborhood, and that's one of the big things meaningful initiatives that we want to continue to do, not just do a one-time thing when we move into the school, but actually continue to do door-to-door outreach to families. And I do that at least every 2 weeks. I go around the neighborhoods. Is everything still going okay? So that's a little bit of part of my role. Also, we're expanding our ELAC, and I'm super excited and proud. I work with a lot of schools in this area, Modesto City Schools, and I know parent engagement is important, and language is important. And so we are expanding and doing our ELAC completely in Spanish. And our first initial even informational meeting before we kicked out the committee, we have 25 members come to the first meeting where we conducted all in Spanish. And then as we mentioned before, we have our newly founded HYLC club, and it's super exciting for kids to kind of identify and be part of it. We have our shirts. I was going to wear it today, but I think I need to look a little bit more professional than having my t-shirt. But yeah, anyway, so and just to give you a sense, people ask, what are our long-term goals? I think we want to be, like I said, we want to be always constantly listening to our community. Currently we have about 102 students from the zip code around the school. So so we have 102 students from the 95351 zip code. And one of the biggest things is when families come, we do active listening of them. So I do a lot of listening, especially the ones that are monolingual Spanish. I take them in to make sure that we're listening to their concerns. And some of them are just things that they would like to get out of from their hearts. And also developing community partnerships. I know I think Adolfo has come to our school. There were some folks came to do a little bit of a tour. City council members, business people. We're kind of want to form and build those partnerships and bridges with our community, and we want to do also alliances with as many people as we can. And so that's a little bit about why and how we are involved with the Vanguard. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
So that's that concludes our presentation. We'd love to host a visit. This is an exciting time to be at Vanguard, because there's a lot going on, and we're filling the space with a lot of joy and laughter, and we'd love to have you sometime.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Weiler. All right. Are there any questions from the board of the applicant? Trustee West.
I just wanted to clarify the number of students from your site or from the 3 sites in Modesto that, what's the percentage of students that go to MJC versus the students that go to a 4-year school?
So thanks for asking. There's a lot of self-report there. So we work pretty hard at our regional office. We have someone who's focusing specifically on following up with alumni. We have about 60% of our students are reporting that they've gone to 4-year schools. And so of the 80, we referenced an 84% number earlier. About 60% of those are 4-year schools, and the remaining is MJC in most cases.
So the 60% to a 4-year is directly to a 4-year school?
Correct.
Thank you.
Trustee Irvin.
Yes, impressive report. I just wanted to know how are things going in terms of discipline over at Vanguard, suspensions and things like that, behavior things. How have you been able to mitigate that amongst the student population there?
Sure.
Also, and then one last thing. I used to be a member of the SOS. What happened to that beautiful pool?
I can answer both of those. So we put a lot of thought into discipline and school culture. We frankly weren't entirely sure what to expect. We knew we were going to once again get an influx of new students. That's what we wanted. That's why we relocated. We embraced that. And we're very pleased with the first quarter. We're very pleased with the first quarter. We have maintained some things that are important to us: restorative justice practices, active listening with families, engagement, working hard to reduce our suspension rate, actively putting in policies and procedures that make sure we are being equitable in what we're doing. And the numbers are very positive for our first quarter. So we're really pleased with that, in addition to some things we've added. And for the pools, it's actually really relevant. One of the beautiful design aspects of our new campus is that some of the pools, all the pools have been removed, but AstroTurf has been put in two key cases in the exact footprint of the old pools. So we're actually really excited that it's a spirit of our past, and we're looking to find other ways to really bring the SOS history alive in what we're doing.
All right. Trustee Brown.
Yes, the report was that there are 102 students from the surrounding neighborhood. How many of those students are new this year?
I don't have that number. We've been talking a lot about how do we identify who is from the neighborhood. So the best numbers we have is we said, well, let's find out who's from the local zip code. What I'd like to do is also find how many of our students are walking to school, because I think that's sort of a relevant indicator. Of those 102, I don't know exactly how many of them are new this year.
How many of your students total are new this year?
I don't have that number either. We have, I don't have that number. One thing I do want to add is we are expecting to grow by another 150 to 200 students over the next couple of years.
Thank you.
We'd appreciate a follow-up on that. I think that would be great if you could deliver that to our superintendent. Trustee Walker.
I don't have as much of a question as a request. This is my third time going through a charter. I think we've done 2 with you, and then we have another one. And so on the business side of things, what I'd like to do is say, as the charter laws change, what I'd really like to see is that our legal staff and business office isn't talking about reworking things because the legal stuff wasn't righteous up front. Sort of get the legwork done first, because each time we've done these iterations, it's gone through a spin cycle as things weren't correct and paperwork and legal and da-da-da-da. And so, yes, I'm in the weeds, but it is a request to, as we work together as a team, let's be right on the first take and work on sort of the negotiations part secondary versus sort of, for lack of what's the right term I'm using here, I'm looking to our lawyer. But I think you get my contention is that we're not reworking and that I's are dotted, T's are crossed, because it's a complicated process, and I think that goes to valuing relationships.
Thank you. All right. So are there any more questions from the board? All right. Let's go to the audience if there's any comments or questions. All right. I'm looking. Isabella, you want to come up?
I just wanted to say I'm really excited to see what happens at our new location, because after hearing my English teacher, who I love, by the way, she actually it was with Mr. Weiler. She was a co-teacher with him for a little while. But I'm really excited to see what happens, especially in the art department, after hearing her talk about the things in the committees that they were discussing. And as someone who likes different forms of art, I'm really excited about that. I can't wait to see what happens.
Great. Thank you for sharing. All right. Anyone else in the audience? All right. Back to the board for comment, where this is only an information item. We'll be voting on this at a later date after our 2 councils get together. Any other comments? All right. Thank you for coming tonight and sharing information. And I want to echo Trustee Walker's, I think he was trying to say, just we need to cooperate and make sure that we, if there's any questions or anything, just continue to work together so that we can make this a speedy process. A question or a comment?
A question.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
I did not think of this question until now. Can you tell me exactly, when you hear from families as to why they chose to go to Spire, what their main reason for coming to your school is?
Thank you. Yeah. We hear a variety of reasons.
Right.
We hear, in some cases, what exhilarates me the most is what we hear is families are excited to have something close by. Mm-hmm. So when families walk up, they say, we've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. Mm-hmm. So we hear that. We hear in some cases that students didn't feel that their other schools were the right fit. They wanted something a little smaller, a little more customized. I think those are probably the 2 biggest ones. Okay. Any others that you would add, relevant? Yeah, those are the really biggest ones.
Okay. And safety, was safety an issue or no? Do they mention safety at all?
I think safety is sort of wrapped up in the size issue. I think for some families, not all, but some families feel that a smaller setting, a more intimate context is inherently safer for them, and we certainly go out of our way to make it feel that way.
Do they say anything about the curriculum that you offer as opposed to the other options that they have in the other schools that they live nearby?
We are unique with our early college model.
Right.
So we do have a lot of families coming to us for that. Okay. That would be, in particular, sort of our later transfers in. Yeah. We also find that some families come to us just because in their reality they're looking for a safe haven or something that they feel comfortable. And so we actually do a lot of educating with our families about what's possible with our curriculum and our early college model.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for answering the question. All right. So if there are no more questions, comments from the board, again, this was just a report, public hearing. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. And then open up the regular board meeting and move on to agenda item B5. Report on the first month final enrollment. And I'd like to turn this matter over to Mr. Walterstorff.
Good evening, President Newman, Board of Trustees, and Superintendent Noguchi. I'm Dwayne Walterstorff, Senior Director of Planning and Facilities.
Little technological issue there.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to have my presentation.
Do you want to, we probably are due for a break. Do you want to take a quick break so we find it? Probably a good idea. That'll stretch our legs for a moment, then we'll take a quick break. All right, let's call it back to order, the meeting back to order. We're on item B5. This is a report on the first month final enrollment. And Mr. Walterstorff, are we working now, the technological?
I hope we're working now. So
Good.
We'll take two here. So good evening again, President Newman, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Noguchi. I'm Dwayne Walterstorff, Senior Director of Planning and Facilities. And here we're moving on. The purpose of the presentation tonight is to provide an update on the 2018-19 first month enrollment. Because this is a report, it will not require any board action. We will review total enrollment for both districts, then each district separately. After that, we will look at cohort analysis for each of the districts. Then we'll move on to next steps, and finally to questions. Total enrollment for both districts is presented here, and there are 6 years presented going from 2013-14 to 2018-19. The light blue represents the elementary district, the gray represents the high school district, and the dark blue represents special education, but only the special day classes, not those who are involved in resource that would normally reside in a regular class. Those kids are counted as regular, the general enrollment in those schools. So the enrollment for both districts for 18-19 was 30,024 students. The enrollment for 2013 was 29,975 students. So over these 6 years, we've been hovering right around the 30,000 mark. We've had a low of 29,898 students and a high of 30,368 students. Now we're going to look at just the elementary district. So that's the K through 8. And again, this is a 6 years of enrollment from 2013-14 to 2018-19. The enrollment in 2018-19 is 14,988 students. And that, again, we've got general ed and we've got special day classes. And the enrollment for 2013-14 was 15,399 students. The elementary has been declining 411 students over these 6 years. This graph, we're going to show a 2-year comparison of each of our 22 K6 schools. The largest decline is at Bret Harte, 89 students. We had projected a decline of 33 students. We did move 25 students to Fairview because of overload in the classroom, and that would explain Fairview's increase. Other declining ones are Robb Road had 71 student decline, and Kirshen had a 35 student decline. The 7 schools south of Modesto High, that would be Bret Harte, Burbank, Fairview, Kirshen, Marshall, Shackelford, and Robb Road, declined 162 students, or 3.5%. That's our largest area of decline. Next, we move on to the junior highs. That would be the 7-8, and we're doing a 2-year comparison for each of the schools. Hanshaw, Mark Twain, Roosevelt increased their enrollment over last year. Loma had a decline of 32 students. We had only projected a decline of 8. Next, we move on to the high school. Again, we're looking at a 6 years of enrollment from 2013-14 to 2018-19. The enrollment for 2018-19 is 15,036 students. The enrollment for the year 13-14 was 14,576 students. So the high school district has increased 460 students over these 6 years. Now, we did have a slight decline of 88 students from 2017 to 2018. Now we're going to do a 2-year comparison of each of the 9-12 schools. Enochs, Grigori, and Johansson are showing declines in their enrollment. Enoch's decline is the result of a smaller class of 8th graders from Sylvan schools who are now 9th graders. Johansson's decline is primarily the result of a smaller class of 8th graders from Empire who are now the 9th graders there. Grigori's decline is still under investigation. Now we're going to move into the cohort analysis. And so here we have the elementary district, the K-8. The top of the graph shows the number of general education students by grade for each over the last 6 years. The middle of the chart shows the change in enrollment from year to year. For the most part, the enrollment has been declining year by year to a total of 555 students over 5 years. The bottom of the chart shows the change in student population as the students move from one grade to the next through the years. Most of the numbers for movement from 1st grade through 8th grade are negative. The biggest decline is the movement from 6th grade to 7th grade, an average decline of 88 students per year. Now for the high schools, the 9-12s. Again, the top of the graph shows the number of general education students by grade for each of the last 6 years. The middle of the chart shows the change in enrollment from year to year. On average, the enrollment has been increasing for a total of 225 students over the years shown. The bottom of the chart shows the change in student population as students move from one grade to the next through the years. All of the movement numbers are negative. The greatest decline is the movement from 11th grade to 12th grade. If we focus on the fiscal year 18-19 movement, for the movement from 9th grade to 10th grade, and the movement from 10th grade to 11th grade, each movement declined 70 more students than the average of the previous years before that. The 9th grade in fiscal year 18-19 is 127 students smaller than the fiscal year 17-18. So these additional declines are what is causing the decline we had this year from last year to this year at the high school level. Now we're on to next steps. So the question comes is, where did these students go? And then analyzing data to determine short and long range action plan for declining enrollment. We need to review our enrollment projection procedures for 1920 to see if we can come in better on those projections. And then once we go back through all this, we'll come back to the board with findings and an action plan at a future board meeting. And that concludes my report on the 2018-19 first month enrollment. Again, no action is required by the board, and so now is the time for you to ask questions.
Any questions for Mr. Walterstorff? Trustee Brown had his light on first.
So a couple of questions. One that really jumped out to me was Rob Road losing 71 students this year. That's already a very small student population. How's that affecting staffing and class sizes? Have we had to consolidate classes, or what's happening at that school?
Yes, we've with that is we monitored that through the first 4 weeks of the school year. the senior directors of the elementary schools and HR met together on a weekly basis to review what was happening, and so as a result, not necessarily there can be some smaller classes there, but also we just make sure we didn't hire any more teachers than we needed to, and so some of those were were temporary teachers. That if, as we were concluding this, then some of those positions we just didn't hire as permanent.
And another question that I had, it looked like we had an increasing number of special ed students. Are those students that are moving from regular ed to special ed, or are they coming from other areas?
I do not have an answer for that.
I could comment. I would say it's probably a little bit of a mix of both. We had an increase in the overall numbers of kids that came into us from the feeders that fed into the high school, so a slight overall increase. But even then, our elementary district has also experienced an increase in special day class students, primarily students with severe handicaps, primarily students with autism, as a matter of fact.
Are they coming from elsewhere?
I do think that some people do move into the area, but no, I mean, there's identification in Stanislaus County is up in terms of children with autism coming through VMRC and the station and how we have the kids that come into us. Yeah.
So some of those students were previously regular education students?
No. They would have been identified early on and then probably placed into a special day class as early as preschool, and then they worked their way up. But no, they wouldn't have been in general education and then went into a special day class.
Okay.
All right, Trustee Irvin.
I wanted to know what's the impact on the budget with the decline in the enrollments, and I'm assuming that the budget was based on projections from previous years. Does it call for adjusting the budget now that we have the final numbers, or for this year, or does it not have any impact on the budget to make up for those for that ADA that's lost based on the projection?
I can answer a little bit of it. Again, Michelle Price would have a better answer for that, but some of it has to do with more of the decline is going to affect us in future years. The state does give us a little bit of a reprieve, and so there shouldn't be too much adjustment in the current year, I think, but it definitely will be affecting us in the future.
I can speak a little bit to that. So this current year, the state doesn't hold us accountable for the number of kids we have this year for our current budget. We'll be budgeted next year for our current students this year. So next year, roughly, we'll have, give or take, $7 million less in the monies that we'll receive because we have less students. So it will impact it next year.
Trustee Walker.
Hey, first of all, thank you. This is probably the best I've seen this report presented in the years I've been here, because normally it's not as easy to read as far as graph-wise, and the breakout from site to site is much easier to read with the pictures. I think you were right with the sort of the picking up on the 6th grade thing. That makes me nervous. Yeah. Because they're fading out, and as I read it, I was looking for them to sort of feed back in at the high school level, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And so I guess the question in my mind as you guys go forward is, if you go fishing and start looking at what's going on, are they drifting in that south side towards Ceres? I think one of our previous presentations tonight is now in that neighborhood, and it may be drifting to the charter because they're new in that neighborhood now. But it's certainly a concern, and that would be certainly something I would look at. The high school doesn't seem to be as big a deal. It seems to be minor. But I'd be real interested in sort of knowing where these junior highs are jumping to, because I don't think they're moving, which means they're going somewhere, and then why, and help us to inform that plan going forward, if that makes sense. The idea that we really drill down into where these are going and sort of get a feel for it, and then use that to build the plan that you guys come back with, if sort of direction. So, I mean, it's sort of a long-term question, but I think the report was great. I think the idea is there, and I guess my contention would be Fish hard, please.
Trustee Brown?
Yeah, one more quick question. As you're looking at the various schools that have the greatest decline, does it appear that we need to make any adjustments in our boundaries and neighborhoods that students attend various schools?
That'll obviously be our future planning, is looking at that. And we have not started down that road yet, but that would definitely be a consideration for the future.
Trustee Marks?
As I recall, in the past, we were able to track the students. We'd receive a report along with, maybe later than this one, that had the schools they were attending and how many students were attending them, including, this was before charter schools, but it was mostly private schools and then some of the surrounding area schools that we've had. Are we going to be able to track them like that? I don't know if they sent records requests or how we tracked them before, but I thought that was possible. Is that kind of what we're going to look at?
That's what we will be looking at. I've asked the two staff in my office to begin to look at that, especially at the high school level, and it takes a little bit of effort, but we will definitely put forth that effort. We'll have to engage each of the attendance clerks at the sites to help out as well, because you do have to look at every student individually and gather that information, and so it is rather time consuming, but yes, that is a plan to do that.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Walterstorff, for your thorough report. We'll go out to the audience. I don't know if there's really anybody left or yeah, you guys, if you guys have questions, comments. Yeah, I'm sorry. Now you have to ask a question, Mr. Peterson. All right. So there, any other questions, comments from the audience? Well, I appreciate the staff's thorough report on this. I look forward to figuring out more of why. I think that's an essential question that is naturally grows from this data, and so I appreciate the thorough report. That takes us on to item B6, which is the review of District Special Education Department programs and services. Mr. Herbst.
All right. Good evening, Board President Newman, trustees, Superintendent Iguchi, and fellow cabinet members. The plan this evening is to provide an update on our District Special Education Department and an independent analysis that was conducted during the previous school year. Joining me tonight, over there, Christina Romero, K6 Supervisor, Dr. Christy Allen, 712 Supervisor. The purpose of the presentation is to provide some background in regard to why we did the analysis in the first place, the findings of the report, his recommendations, next step, and then address any questions of the board. In essence, we did this analysis for three very, very distinct reasons. One of those is, I think, that perhaps Trustee Brown was just mentioning, the identification numbers in Modesto City Schools are well above state average. Secondly, and this is a phenomenon up and down the state, due to increasing costs of special education, there's been an increased cost and a hit to the general fund as a result. So we wanted this analysis to figure out if we could do anything and streamline any of our processes. B, and part of our current contract is an agreement through collective bargaining that we would actually analyze our staffing ratios and caseload sizes to determine whether or not we were following what's into industry standards, if our classes were too high, too low, etc. Ms. Romero?
Good evening.
Good evening. So the district contracted with Dr. Bill Gillespie from Educational Strategic Planning, and Dr. Bill Gillespie is a former special educator, a school psychologist, a site administrator, and a county office of education superintendent. He is also well known for his work with the Financial Crisis Management Assistance Team, also referred to as FCMAT, which conducted numerous special education studies up and down the state of California throughout the last few years. The scope of the study included an analysis of our district's movement towards MTSS, which is multi-tiered systems of support, and the response to intervention, or RTI model. The study also reviewed and analyzed our pre-referral program, which is better known to us in Modesto City Schools as our student success team process. Additionally, Dr. Gillespie reviewed our progress in educating students in the LRE, or least restrictive environment. This particular area looks at the frequency and the duration by which our school day, where our students with disabilities are educated with their typically developing peers in the general education environment. Also, as mentioned before, our staffing ratio was reviewed to determine where our special education caseloads fell within the state industry standards in terms of size. Dr. Gillespie visited Modesto City Schools over the course of 4 days in the month of December of last school year. And during his time, he interviewed staff at all levels, including administrators, psychologists, special education service providers, and teachers, both general education and special educators. Dr. Gillespie also reviewed numerous documents, including our current caseload sizes, our collective bargaining agreements, our financial records, and our state reporting. And based on this information, he was able to develop a comprehensive report that provided numerous recommendations for our district. And Dr. Allen's going to speak to the rest of those.
Good evening. In his findings, Dr. Gillespie highlighted that the current special education identification rate in our district exceeds the statewide average. Modesto City Schools rate is currently at 14.3%, and the statewide averages are approximately 11.3%. His findings attributes this to the lack of systematic academic support that addresses students' needs at the earliest levels. However, Dr. Gillespie recognized a model of the RTI that has been developed at James Marshall Elementary, and he recommended that this model be replicated at additional sites throughout the district. Additionally, Dr. Gillespie stated positive behavior intervention and support is inconsistently implemented within the district, especially at the secondary level. And he found that our SST process was effective, but also not consistently implemented across the district. Dr. Gillespie also recognized that the numbers of students educated in a self-contained special education class was problematic. And after analyzing our staffing and caseload sizes, he found our staffing ratios fell within industry standards. When looking specifically at classroom supports, he found high numbers of special education paraprofessionals and the need to develop training, processes, and procedures, especially for paraprofessionals that serve at the one-on-one capacity. Dr. Gillespie made numerous recommendations based on his comprehensive analysis. One was the need to develop a multi-tiered system of support, or the MTSS process, which includes a response to intervention in the areas of academics and behavioral supports. Ms. Mack and Mr. Herbst will go into greater detail regarding MTSS and the actions that the district plans to address this area in an upcoming board report. Dr. Gillespie also recommended additional PBIS and student success team trainings to promote greater consistency across our sites.
Department procedures were reviewed and specific revisions and adjustments were recommended. This included the addition of ongoing training for both certificated and classified staff. Dr. Gillespie also recommended a closer review and analysis of students riding contracted transportation, which is basically the contract that we have with store transportation. While Dr. Gillespie identified areas of strength within the special education department, he also gave us areas the department should focus on moving forward. In order to address these recommendations, our office developed a 2-year action plan that honestly, guys, it drives the work of not only myself, the supervisor of special education's goals, but also the program manager. So it's all systematic to us all working for the same toward the same cause. Thus far, we've made progress in implementing many of his recommendations. Since the review of Dr. Gillespie's report, we've conducted training for all certificated special educators and are in the process of developing paraprofessional training specific to, well, one-on-ones in essence, but also even the paraprofessionals that are working in our classrooms. We think that we can improve in that area. We've also have developed and implemented new procedures regarding the assessment and determination of additional adult supervision, known as our SKIA procedures. Big hats off to Chris Romero out there, who really took the bull by the horns and completed that process. It outlines an assessment process and a variety of other assessment process, and gives the adults focus for when they're working with our kids in a one-on-one environment to eventually teach them the skill and then fade it back so our kids can become as independent as possible. We have also completely rewritten our staff handbook to provide increased direction to our staff at the school sites. We're scheduling ongoing meetings with budget to make sure that our staff are all coded and flagged in the appropriate spot. Finally, we're working with Mr. Zierli in the transportation department. As we complete our analysis, we're going to see just how many students that we can, and once again, by keeping obviously the needs of our fragile learners intact, but also utilizing district transportation to the greatest extent possible for those that can ride a Modesto City School bus. In summary, can't speak highly enough for the analysis completed by Dr. Gillespie. I think it was, I don't want to say it was an eye-opener for the SELPA, but I'll tell you, I think overall we have a pretty good pulse for what's going on in the SELPA, but I think it was beneficial to get somebody that came in with a fresh set of eyes and gave us some recommendations. Overall, very, very pleased with where we're going and, well, where we're at and where we plan on going over the next 2 years. And I'm available, or I should say we're available, although I bet you they will delegate it back to me, so I think I'm available for any questions.
All right. Are there any questions for Mr. Herbst? Trustee Walker.
Okay, so I picked up on one. I thought the report was great. I think when we talked about it earlier last week, the idea that if we're identifying early, then it mirrors what we should be really doing across other sort of areas where you're talking about ELs and so forth and so on. If we get there early and we're on it actively, we're in a much better shape moving forward.
You're absolutely right. Intervening early. What you want to do is intervene early so that basically the gap, the academic gap or the behavioral gap doesn't have time to come to this. You intervene early to hopefully actually create no gap.
Because that's where I was headed, because it seems like ideally, if I'm not mistaken, just sort of at the statewide policy level, where possible, we're trying to get them to a point where we're mainstreaming them back into the classrooms, correct?
Correct.
Because then we're sort of back on track more or less with some, you could probably choose the better word, but attention to make sure that it doesn't go sideways. But ideally that we're like anything else, ELs, struggling students, a student in a secondary sort of support system that's struggling, get them back mainstreamed.
Correct.
And that same idea portrays to our special needs students as well.
Agreed.
And PBS inconsistencies at secondary level you mentioned. I'm going to fish for one here. If we were looking at inconsistencies and they noticed them at the high school, does that mean they didn't notice them at the elementary, junior high level?
No, he was and I think I presented this to you guys when I did this about a year and a half ago when I talked about PBIS and restorative practices. I think PBIS personally has been an easier sell at elementary, and I don't want to fault the high schools. I also think when you're just coming on sheer size of a high school site,
yes,
I mean getting everybody to go in a direction or support PBIS or really even understand what it is always a challenge. And again, you know, we've talked about substitutes and the dilemma of pulling people out for additional training. It's just it's a delicate balance, I guess you could say.
I was searching for a gold star.
Oh.
but I think it makes sense because we've talked about it over the years that there's this gap as we move through, and so you train and then you sort of lose folks and they come back and they train.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And I would imagine, I guess the long-term question would be, is it working in the sense of PBIS? And we see inconsistencies, not because it's not, but because sites have implemented it differently at each site, because what they may be doing there may be more effective there than would be elsewhere, excepting the big monster campuses like Enochs and Gregory where you can get lost at.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Great report.
Thank you.
Trustee Brown.
I appreciate the report very much, and appreciate all the effort that is given to the students with special needs and the ability that they have to perform at their best and highest level. So thank you. Question about funding and budget. We see the gap between our percentage of students and the gap or the percentage statewide. So many districts have far fewer students than we do per capita. Is there any special funding based on the number of special ed students, or do we just get the same percentage that everyone else does?
No. First off, I want to thank you, and it's nice to be able to work with such wonderful people over there, and I got some great resource specialists sitting back there, so honestly, it's a collective effort, so I appreciate the initial compliment. But to go back on your financial question, there is no additional funding beyond what a child generates in terms of ADA. There's nothing because you have necessarily more. Also, even though we hover right around the 14%, actually I think we're a little bit down from that now. But the 11.3%, that California number we quoted, that up and down the state, special education numbers are on the rise. So they usually only do these studies on a year-to-year basis. You'll get it, roundabout in terms of what the state average is, but state averages are up across the state of California. special ed.
So just a reminder to all of us on the board, we need to watch this carefully. There is no fair funding formula that addresses our high percentage of special ed students and the extreme need that they have, which our entire district suffers because the percentage of dollars that we can put into general ed classrooms decreases according to what we have to spend for special education. So we need to always be looking at ways that we can lobby and get that equity back for Modesto City Schools.
There has been a handful of bills, and perhaps I could send them through to Dr. Noguchi for you guys, some bills to watch and some bills that unfortunately didn't go through. But I would say, I can't say for the first time in a long time, but I would say that they're looking at how they provide money to SELPAs. They're also looking and providing funding for preschool, specifically children with children with autism in our preschool program. A very, very, very expensive program that doesn't generate any dollars. I mean, we don't get any money for that. That is a hit upon a hit, and it's an incredibly expensive program.
And the high number of students speaks to how well we're addressing the need of special ed students in the district. And so what is a compliment becomes a punishment as well.
Trustee Irvin.
Yes, I'd like to reiterate that great report. My question is did he, since
Dr. Gillespie.
Dr. Gillespie. When is he related to Dizzy Gillespie? No. Did he take a look at our compliance with the IEP process?
Oh. So, thank goodness no. And I don't mean that. CDE does an awful good job about looking at our compliance in that area. And honestly, I would say, and it's Dr. Allen's actually going to come hopefully at the next board meeting and give you guys an update on something called the compliance review, because CDE came in and monitored our high school sites to check exactly that. And so we obviously had some findings. Nobody's perfect, and I can't remember. Chris sometimes tabulates this. I think there's like 346 ways you can make a mistake on an IEP. So I mean, it is a challenge. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But we will definitely be commenting that in terms of what the overall findings were. And overall, actually, because I've been through a review 3 or 4 years ago when I was doing this before, and I would say we've made growth. There's still areas that we need to focus on, no doubt about it.
Thank you.
Trustee West.
I've noticed the rise in autism identification as well the last few years. And when we talk about the over-identification of special ed students, have you looked at, when identifying students, looking at maybe a 504 rather than an IEP?
I say it at just about any training in front of our psychologists, et cetera. We underutilize 504 in this district, and we over-identify special education. I do believe that 504 should be utilized. I do believe, I really think, though, that the key to get over the over-identification rate, and Ms. Mack and I will be talking about this, I want to say in November, really is developing a multi-tiered system of support and response to intervention, and really targeting systematic interventions across the board for kids before they have a chance to get behind. We believe that that's the next step.
Thank you.
Trustee Walker.
Just one more to pick up on what Trustee Brown was talking about on the funding. We have to go back in the time machine, so Marla may have to jump in here. But I think it was one of my great frustrations when we switched over to this new sort of ESSA model, was that in the prior education world, we looked at special needs students as a subcategory all by itself and went towards funding. And when they went back to that ESSA model, they plugged in foster children, free and reduced lunch, and so forth, and it got shuffled out. I think California has done a fairly decent job of trying to pick that up. But part of what happened when they rolled this model over was at the federal level, and correct me if I'm wrong, but special ed got pulled out, foster children got pushed in, and that became a bigger category, or not a bigger category, accountable towards how we allocate money. And I've always had a problem there, but I'm pretty sure that used to be when we used to do star reports and subgroups, special needs was always there. And now it's sort of, we push it in, but it's not at the SSA level, if I'm not mistaken.
So you're mixing state accountability systems and federal accountability systems. So the LCFF came about in 2013, and at that same time they were doing a study, and there was a task force for special ed through the state of California that was supposed to enlighten the work around funding and other things with special ed. Unfortunately, that went away because we went into an economic downturn, and LCFF went forward without special ed. Federally, that's different altogether, so there's a little bit of mix. However, current administration, although is going out, there is a real deep understanding that we, as the state of California, have to do something about special ed, so I would anticipate the new governor picking that up, probably not the first year, but within that second or third, because the legislature also is speaking about it. So it's something that'll have to be handled at some point.
And I would agree. I think I've got more hope there. I really do. I think there's more likelihood that the Assembly comes through and funds special ed correctly than some of the other ideas that are out there. I saw something today about a 32% increase in funding, which I think is a fantasy. That money's not there, but I do think that there's at least attention at the state level, and I think there's a lot more hope there than there is in other areas because it's severely underfunded and has been forever, and it's one of my pet peeves that drives me nuts because it just gets shuffled away.
Anyone else? All right. I just have one question. Mr. Herbst, thank you for this report, and thank you, Dr. Allen and Ms. Romero. This increase, and echoing Trustee Brown and Trustee Walker's concern about the increase of the number of special education students, because that's the ultimate financial obligation then we have. So we're at 14% when the state average is 11.3%.
Yeah, and it's approximate. Again, moving target. We're probably a hair under 14% right now. And state average, I haven't gotten the most updated. I want to say that the report covered 11.3. My guess is it's probably at the high 11s, but I don't have the numbers to support it right now.
Now, the state's demographics don't look exactly like us. So, I mean, for our demographics, we have a high rate of poverty, which there could be some issues with, poverty in terms of some causal relationships to this, access to healthcare, nutrition, such. And so are we off? Are our numbers too high for the same demographics? If we were to look at a similar demographic group, are we off? Are we still too high?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, you can go into certain districts that have, I would say, similar demographics, and their percentages are lower. And honestly, typically what some of those districts have done, they've developed a well-structured response to intervention multi-tiered system of support model. Again, I think that's the key. But then you can see some anomalies too, Trustee or Board President Newman. You can see a spot to where you would think, wow, this is a completely different demographics in Modesto City Schools, and there's identification rate is sky high. So again, I if you ask me, I think it's how well the districts have set up that structure of support and of targeted intervention at the early levels. That's truly what I think drives why some districts have high rates and some districts do not.
Okay. And so in order to identify and intervene at an early level, we need to make sure that we're getting students into our early childhood education programs and that kind of thing, and recruitment and whatnot. And so is that part of the summary of findings that he had?
Yeah, we didn't touch on it much today because really today's was to focus on directly what the special education department is doing.
Right.
The next presentation that we do in November between Marla Mack and I is something that her and I are working on together. Because multi-tiered system of supports isn't a special ed initiative. Special education needs to be sitting at the table right along with educational services, but it's really a direction for the district for general and special ed working together.
Okay. And early childhood education's that part of that.
Sure.
Okay. All right. We call it child development. Okay. Thank you. Any more questions? All right. Are there any comments or questions from the audience? Our resource teacher is here to give us some advice. Good evening.
And Cameron Gwynn, resource teacher at Enochs High School. I believe Dr. Allen did state, Dr. Gillespie's report did indicate that all of our caseloads appear to be in industry standards. I did want to point out that he did have some concerns, primarily with classroom size at the secondary level. For those of you that do not know, at SDC classes, our special day classes, traditionally your caseload is pretty much your class because you have those students for the duration of the day. However, at the high school level, some of our SDC teachers do specialize in their specific academic areas. Some teach math, some teach English, some teach history. Those students rotate, and those teachers do have students in their classes that are not on their caseload. So oftentimes those classes do exceed industry standards for the size of the class. And within the last 5 years, I would say that those have been increasing at a pretty good rate. So I just want to make that point of clarification. And I do have some concern as a special education teacher of the classroom, increasing classroom size.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your concerns. Anyone else? All right. This is just a report. So we aren't taking any action on that. So we'll move on to Board of Education approval of resolution number 1819-2 proclaiming October 8th through the 14th as week of the school administrator in Modesto City Schools. This was briefly mentioned by Dr. Noguchi at the beginning of our board meeting, and I turn it over to Dr. Noguchi.
So at this time, as mentioned earlier, we already pretty much spoke to it and really the purpose and the point for it, although now I do have the dates, which begins October 8th through the 14th. So we asked for you to approve the resolution, and I believe that we need to do a roll call on this one.
Right. Are there any questions on the resolution? Seeing no questions. Are there any comments from the audience? All right, no comments from the audience. Then back to the board for comment and a motion. I'm looking for hands. All right, the motion's been made by Trustee Walker and seconded by Trustee Lopez. And so then will you call the roll, Dr. Noguchi?
Trustee Brown?
Aye.
Trustee Lopez?
Aye.
Trustee Marks?
Aye.
President Newman?
Aye.
Trustee Walker?
Aye.
Trustee West?
Aye.
And Trustee Urban?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously and the resolution is approved. This takes us on to item B8, which is public hearing approval of resolution 18-1906. Modesto City Schools provides each pupil at the K-12 traditional sites sufficient textbooks and or instructional materials. And I'd like to turn this matter over to Ms. Mack.
This is a public hearing.
So we're going to close the regular board meeting and I'm going to open the public hearing.
Thank you. Good evening. Education Code 60119 requires the Board of Education shall hold a public hearing and shall make a determination through a resolution as to whether each pupil in each school in the district has sufficient textbooks or instructional materials, or both, in each subject area that is consistent with the content and cycles of the curriculum framework adopted by the state board. The district has provided each student pupil at a K-12 traditional site a standards-aligned textbook or basic instructional materials in history, social science, mathematics, reading, language arts, science, foreign language, 712, and laboratory science equipment 912. All of the District Williams Act schools passed a sufficiency of material visit this fall, meeting our LCAP Goal 1, Action 1. All other sites have confirmed each pupil has sufficient textbooks or instructional materials. It is recommended that the Board of Education conduct a public hearing and approve Resolution 18-1906 that Modesto City Schools provides each pupil at K-12 traditional sites sufficient textbooks and or instructional materials.
All right. Are there any questions for Ms. Mack? Seeing none, are there any comments from the audience? Seeing none, back to the board for action and or comments. Trustee Walker.
Okay, so our board protocols are coming soon. And part of that talks about whether or not you're going to say no or yes on something. I've only abstained on one item in all my time, and this will be the second time on the same item. Why I'm not a yes? I think sufficient's a fairly low bar. I've had questions and continue to have questions and concerns about what we're doing with math. I think I still have questions and concerns about the impact of technology on access when the internet's down. Why I'm not a no. I think sufficient's a fairly low bar, and I think no's the wrong answer, and so is yes, so I'll abstain. But I will say I am closer to a no than I was last year, because I do have concerns, and I do think that we need to exceed sufficient. I think we need to add more supplemental material, and I do think if we're waiting till 2021 to adopt some of these materials, we put ourselves in a difficult position.
Just as a point of clarification, Trustee Walker, that normally when we abstain, it's usually for a conflict, and so that there's a conflict, and so that's probably not something you can abstain on, because there isn't an identified conflict, unless you have something you say, I can't vote yes or no on this because I have a conflict. So if that's what your grounds are, then you can go ahead and state that, but it's usually, the abstention is limited to if there's a conflict and you don't feel like you can vote.
Why would an abstention require a conflict of interest? That would be leaving the room. That's correct?
I actually have to agree with President Newman on this one. At least my experience has been, I actually just wrote a note to Roman, when is this? But it's my understanding there has to be a conflict, because if you don't either agree or disagree, a yes or a no, it forces you to say yes or no unless you have a conflict. So otherwise, we could have multiple times where it's a yes or a no, and then abstain, which you rarely see. So I will look into it for the legal piece to this, but I do believe that President Newman is correct on this one.
Trustee Marks.
So I have a question then. So is this a resolution that we vote on that says that we have, every student has access to a textbook or instructional material?
Yes.
That's correct. Okay. Because at one point in our history, we had said that we had textbooks for every student. We had them, but they did not have access to them because they were still in the warehouse when we voted on this. So I voted no, and actually enough of the board members voted no that they had to bring it back to the board the next week and actually have those textbooks moved out of the warehouse and in the hands of the students. So this one is to say that our students have access to that in their classroom or at home. Okay. That's what I'm asking, so thank you.
All right. Any more comments?
Even though I understand Mr. Walker's concern about what kind of curriculum the students have access to, I totally get that. So I do, and I have some similar concerns about it as well. So, but I think if your concerns are great enough, you should vote your conscience and determine what that is and vote. So to me, and we did have a former superintendent that used to say this, and any of you that were here before, he always said that the coward's way out was to vote to abstain. So
what?
The coward's way out was to abstain.
I just thought that no seems pretty harsh.
I won't say any names of who said that, but we did have a superintendent in my past that said that, and he did not say it really publicly, but he frowned upon it. So anyway.
If we'll force my hand, we'll force my hand. I think no's too harsh, but I think yes is a higher bar.
Okay.
But if that's not good enough reason, then I will say what I say. I just think that no gives the impression that I don't necessarily believe it, but I think yes is a higher bar.
Okay.
But apparently that's not reason enough without legal counsel, so we'll get there in due time.
For reference, our protocols do address abstaining on page 16 of our protocols that we all have in place at this time, and it says all board members have a duty to vote. If a board member is abstaining because of a conflict of interest, the board member shall state the nature of the conflict or interest or other legitimate reason, leave the room, and return only after the vote is completed. If a board member abstains for a separate legitimate reason, the board member shall state it for the record and may stay in the room for a vote. So there is a right to do it, to remain, but normally it is a conflict of interest circumstance. So maybe that's something we could talk about later when we talk about the protocols. So if you want to continue on, these were reviewed by council when we adopted them and and approved them since you've been on the board. So we're looking for a motion then for approval. This is a resolution, so I need a motion before we can approval. Okay, so it's been moved by Trustee Marks and seconded by Trustee Irvin. And Dr. Noguchi, will you please call the roll?
Trustee Brown?
Aye.
Trustee Lopez?
Aye.
Trustee Marks?
Aye.
President Newman?
Aye.
Trustee Walker?
No under duress.
Trustee West?
Aye.
Trustee Irvin?
Aye.
All right, then the resolution passes 6-1 with Trustee Walker stating no. All right, so I'm going to close this public hearing and open up the regular board meeting again. And this takes us on to item B9, which is the approval of the first reading of the proposed draft of the board policy and review of administrative regulations 6164.4, identification and evaluation of individuals for special education. And this sounds like a matter for Mr. Herbst.
Yeah, I think we're just going to keep with the special education theme. Board Policy and Administrative Regulation 6164.4 addresses the entire assessment process for a student suspected of having a disability. The policy and regulation move from the referral process and document the steps required for an initial evaluation, including the requirement for parent or guardian consent. Both BP and AR addresses the legal requirements of what's included in an evaluation and the process the district follows during assessment. Finally, the policy and regulation addresses the legal requirements for reevaluation once every 3 years, and the purpose of that reevaluation is to redetermine eligibility. It also mentions parents' rights to request an independent educational evaluation should there be a situation where the parents disagree with our findings, and then it also states the process that we must follow if and when a parent does make that request. In summary, it's recommended the board approve the first reading and proposed draft to Board Policy and Administrative Regulation 6164.4. I'm prepared to answer any questions you may have. I should have pointed this out probably right from the very beginning. We do not have any language on this. This has been something that we've consistently followed within our district. It's actually in both our old and new SELPA policy. And the recommended language came straight from California School Boards Association.
All right. Trustee Brown.
Just to confirm, we've just heard about a study of our special ed program. Is there any language in this policy that is not consistent with the findings of the study?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Thank you.
Trustee West.
I just had a question or a concern. It mentions here that if the parent does not agree with our assessment, that the parent may seek out their own assessment at public expense. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that we're required to pay for a second assessment?
Yeah, believe it or not. And then if you go a little bit further down into the administrative regulation, it covers it. If a parent requests an independent educational evaluation, district can do one of two things. A, grant it and pay for it at public expense. And we do have some SELPA policies on who we work with. Well, I can't say who we work with, but some guidelines that we follow. But B, a district can initiate a due process hearing to basically demonstrate that our assessment was appropriate. So those are, but you can only do one of those two things: file for due process to demonstrate your assessment was appropriate, or B, fund the IE.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Trustee Marks.
I had a question on B97 on the length of time for an IEP when a parent requests it. So conduct of evaluation, the paragraph just below that, it says that if if the district determines as to whether the student is a student with a disability, conduct the initial evaluation. It's the 60 days. Mm-hmm. I didn't know if that was a regular practice or if it's. I didn't know if the parent would need to know sooner, because I was thinking that's 2 months' time that a student would miss out on education if we determined that they needed to be in a special ed classroom.
I would say that there are times, Trustee Marks, to where we're pushing 50, 55 days. Okay. There are times to where an evaluation could be done, and I don't want to make it sound instantaneous. I mean, our special educators are busy people. Our school psychologists are incredibly busy. But I would say we typically get done before that time. If that's a concern. But yeah, legally you have 60 days.
But you wanted to make sure it was 60 days. Okay, because I was just thinking as a parent, 60 days sounds like a really long time for me as a parent trying to get my child in the right appropriate education and missing out on, we'll say, a fifth of their year. So it's a significant amount. So. Okay, so if you're good with 60 days, I'll stick with it. I was going to suggest reducing it, but that's fine.
Oh, I totally get your point. I would recommend we follow along with what the state requirements are in this one. I mean, that would be my recommendation, please.
I hear you.
Any other questions? I had one on page B93. It mentions upon receipt of referral for any student to special education and related services, an evaluation plan shall be developed within 15 days.
Correct.
Is that enough time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, typically you're going to get referrals a couple different ways. You could get it through a student success team coming from professionals at a site. You could also get it from a parent. And so when a parent puts their request in writing, we have 15 days to respond. And that 15 days is either with an assessment plan or a document called prior written notice on the reasons why we would be denying an assessment.
Okay. And so that's just to come up with the plan, and then the plan is supposed to be put into place.
Yeah, within 15 days, we need to hand that parent an assessment plan.
Okay. All right. Good deal. Any other questions of the board? All right. Out to the audience for comments, questions. We have our research teacher that's back.
Hi there. Hi again. I would just like to agree with Mr. Herbst. 60 days is definitely necessary in order to do that.
All right, good deal.
Thank you for agreeing, Mr. Glenn.
All right. All right. And back, anyone else? Then back to the board for comment, and I'm looking for a motion. Trustee Walker.
I'll motion after I tell Mr. Herbst good job, because in the spirit of the dot race, if we're at the baseball game, you are 3 laps ahead, sir, because by my count, you only have 2 policies left, and you are the first department that is off the list of anything left to do. And I think that's awesome because I'm tracking.
Good.
2 left, and you have nothing left on the mandated list to do, and it gives me a complete set, which makes me happy.
I don't like having anything looming over my head. I have to get it done, so thank you. I appreciate
I see that because you're moving along rapidly, and I move that we approve.
All right, the motion's been made by Trustee Walker and seconded by Trustee Irvin, and this is just a first reading, so I'm looking for all those in favor, state aye. Aye. Aye, then it is approved unanimously. All right, that takes us to 9A, which is actually E6, and we have very patient George that's been waiting, and I'm very sorry about that.
Learns very much while in the audience.
Yes, enjoyed the meeting, so we all where we need to be. E6, approval insurance contracts to provide general liability, property, boiler, and machinery, and faithful performance of coverages for the 2018-2019 year.
Thank you. Good evening, President Newman, Board of Trustees, and
Hold on a sec.
It's right before miscellaneous, the miscellaneous little tab. It's the one sheet right before.
The end of human resources.
Yes. All right, go ahead.
thank you. Good evening, President Newman, Board of Trustees, and Superintendent Noguchi. I am George Lynn. I'm a Director 1, Risk Management. This year has been very challenging, very difficult. Carriers were contacted. Carriers didn't quote by virtue of what our experience was. And there are 2 concurrent factors that went into the somewhat dramatic rate increase. One is our own losses. The second is the situation in California with respect to sexual abuse and molestation cases. You may be aware or have seen various cases in Northern California where there are multiple single offender and multiple offenses. In Southern California, there was Torrance Unified that had approximately 23 plaintiffs. The settlement in those cases exceeded $23 million. And I believe that Torrance might even have contributed $4 million of its own money. Now that's just liability. With respect to property increase, that was mainly driven by Johansson. Currently, Johansson payments total approximately $15 million, I think, and $300,000. It's estimated that that claim, when closed, will cost $80 million. Now, I want to remind you what we have paid in property in the past. It's about $200,000 to $250,000 a year. So if you total it up 10 years, that's $2.5 million. So if you put it on a scale, we're way ahead of what the company has paid on a single claim. But we're not only talking about a single claim, we're talking about other small fires too. So all those fires add up, all those claims add up, and it's not a question from a claims point of view of frequency, you're coming from a severity issue. When the claim happens, it's really bad. So I'll take the case of the unfortunate young student who was killed in front of Tuolumne several years ago. That resulted in a very good settlement, but still there was a good amount of money paid by the insurance company to settle that claim. And so we have open claims now that will involve the payment of a good amount of money. I can't tell you the amounts because we're in open session, but I will be happy to talk about it when we're in closed because those cases are still open. So those are the drivers. So one of the things we did, and which I conveyed to Dr. Noguchi in a series of emails, and she asked I think she asked 12 questions. They were all well thought out. Was how are we dealing with these claims? And the claim procedure is we try to settle these claims as quickly as possible. The smaller claims we take care of immediately because they're within the $250,000 self-insured retention. So we take care of those very quickly. The more difficult claims, where there are multiple defendants or there's a serious injury, those claims take time, usually from inception to conclusion. With a claim like that, it's 2 years. If you have a more difficult claim where it's based on civil rights or a multitude of federal claims, it might take longer. In our own experience, we had a special ed case that was open for 10 years in litigation. So those kinds of cases do occur, but those cases don't necessarily affect the rate. The rate is affected by, in this case, severity, and on the background is state of California. If we could move our wonderful district to another state, we wouldn't have this issue.
So, Mr. Lynn, let's ask Trustee Walker the question that you had that you pulled the agenda item for. Has that been answered? Just so we can streamline the information that we're gathering here.
Yeah, I think my question or my concern was that this is a huge increase. It's 50%. I felt like it should be brought to the board's attention in the sense that we're moving from a $1.5 million payment out to $2.2 million out. That was the crux of sort of my issue, is that I felt like that should not be in the back in consent. I think the second issue here was about governance, and I don't think it goes specifically to this issue. It goes to a host of issues over the last 3 years where we get something at the last minute that has to be approved, and there is a deadline against it, and it doesn't give us time for thought or reflection. This isn't about a yes or no vote. This is about the ability for us to process something that's coming downstream at us. I think there's a way to handle this with respect to board communications so that there's a heads up that we know there's $1 million increase coming, because I think it also affects other decisions within the budget. I think if we're making decisions about how we're going to spend a certain dollar here or there, it's helpful to know that you have a bill that's getting ready to double on you. And it may in fact reflect on a vote on another issue in front of you. And again, the biggest issue being, having to vote on something on a given night where if you don't say yes, it's a huge problem and puts us in a bind as a district is a governance model problem to me, and I don't expect to see it again. But this was an instance where I can highlight that. Coming back to us, at least me personally, and being told I have to vote on something, and if I don't vote yes, it goes down the drain and we're in trouble, is bad timing. I think we need time to process a bit, and especially at high levels. And I think you've answered my question. I think I was sort of aware, but I wanted everybody else to be aware. But I also think it's important for the public to be aware when you've got a bill that's getting ready to double. And going from 1.1 to 2.2 is doubling, more or less.
Yeah, respectfully, sir. It was a surprise to me, but I'm not justifying when you got the information. I was surprised in terms of the length of time it took to get that information from the broker. Point is well taken.
And it wasn't meant directly at you. It's like I said, this is the reason I pulled this was a global concern that goes back 3 years. And it just so happened that I picked up on this one and said, okay, first of all, I wanted everybody else to know that it wasn't in the back of the agenda and be aware that we just had this increase. But it was also an opportunity to highlight what I feel is a practice that we should correct. It's not relative to you or your department. It's sort of gone on for 3 years, and I think we can all sort of point to different instances.
Also, I would be remiss on the slight issue. We did receive a $40,000 set-off in terms of one of the liability carriers. So the amount that's in the board agenda is really now $40,000 less. We have made runs at other carriers as well. So.
But thank you for your time, and I appreciate it. And I know you had to wait. I had you much higher, but I deferred.
Well, thank you.
Trustee Brown?
I want to thank Trustee Walker for bringing this public rather than buried in consent. It feels to me also like if we have something that is this substantial, we need to bring it to the public part of a meeting rather than have it feel like the board is trying to hide a high expense in consent.
Just had that feel.
Trustee Irvin?
Yes, I was going to thank John as well because... Yes. I went over that as well, looking at that, and then when I saw it was on the consent, and being new here, I didn't know how to pull that, as the question. So when he asked it, I was like, oh, okay, that's the way you do it. Because I was going to say, wow, 50% increase, is that, exhausting all of the, other carriers, legitimate carriers, and then you explain exactly what it was directly attributed to. So now, I kind of understand that, but it's not a situation where they're hijacking us and we can't go anywhere else, or, something like that.
Thank you.
All
yeah,
right.
to being held hostage, literally.
Understood.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lynn.
Can I add also, if you wouldn't
Yeah.
mind?
Yes.
Not only did it put you in that position, we put Dr. Noguchi in that position too with timing. So it has caused us some reflection relative to timelines and how we can drive things back sufficient enough to be able to afford you the information to make an informed decision. And those conversations have already been underway.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. All right. Thank you, Mr. Lynn. If there's no more questions or comments, back to the audience. Any questions, comments? All right. Then I'm looking for a motion here for approval of...
So moved.
All right. So there's been a motion made by Trustee Walker for approval of item 9A and a second by Trustee Marks. All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Then the motion passes unanimously. All right, that takes us on back to the last business item, which is the discussion of, right? We are back on, yes, B10, discussion review of board protocols, a draft. And this is, I guess this is my item. So you go through just a little editing. We'd adopted these protocols back in February, June of 2013, and when we get new board members, we need to update them. We had a board governance workshop, and we came up with some ideas of what to change, and just going through them. And so you'll see things, because we don't have color copies, you'll see the editing and it's in a strike through, and then the new items are underlined. So so to the first page, we're striking out the date. We'll figure out when we have the new date. And then when we drafted the protocols, we had this professional governance standards additional document. Really, the protocol should be one document, and that's the only document we have, and we don't really incorporate, everything that's in there is incorporated in here. We don't need that. So it should be a document that stands on its own. So then on to 2. This was when I developed the protocols, I was looking at 2 other protocols in other school districts, and so they had some additional governance team norms that I thought were appropriate. So that's number 2. And then on to page 3, the 13, 14, 15, same thing. Those were additional. Okay, so then on the first protocol, number 1, the only thing that's really a big change there is it's on page 5. That the way it was written was not the way it was really going about what we were doing. So the superintendent shall send a draft agenda to the president and vice president, and this goes out Monday, and then we go to print on the agenda on usually Tuesday. And so there's adjustments made that the board president or vice president make, and then so before the board agenda is printed, there's some meet and confer on what's on the agenda. So the protocol's been changed to reflect what actually happens. And then really not too many thing else. Oh, yes, on page 4, the change, it's been suggested when we talked about it at the workshop for changing a previously discussed item. We had to place a previously discussed item on agenda, a non-prevailing board member. And do we understand what a non-prevailing board member is? Mm-hmm. So if we have a vote and it's 3 to 4, and so one of the board members in the 3 that didn't win on that vote could not request a reconsideration of that item until 2 years later. So we wouldn't keep having to bring back things. So it's kind of a limit to just rehashing things we'd already all voted on. And so it was suggested to change that from 2 years to 1 year. So what do you guys think? Yeah. Trustee Marks?
It's all right. I did not know why it was 2 years past. I know when I had asked about bringing something back, I was told 2 years. I had to wait 2 years. I didn't know why the 2 years, why it was to delay it, but that was a long time. So I think 1 year is fine.
And I took out the non-curriculum discussion action item. It's basically any agenda item, so there isn't any qualification. It's just any agenda item, and the non-prevailing board member. Now a prevailing board member. So say somebody in it was a 4-3 split. So a prevailing board member says, I want to change my vote. That can happen sooner. Mm-hmm. So that board member can ask for reconsideration, and that's happened since we've been on the board. Mm-hmm. All right, so that's on page 4. Page 5, I think we went over because I jumped to that. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to just buzz through this.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how soon is that?
What?
How soon can someone bring that up if they're on the prevailing side? What you were just mentioning. If
you wanted to change your vote, well, generally it's something that I got new information and it's done at the next board meeting. But so we don't have any qualification of how soon that is. But if that would change the outcome of the vote. So that's only relevant if it changes the outcome of the vote. So if it was a 4-3 split and you're on the 4 side, and it would have changed the outcome. If it's a 5-2 split and you're on the prevailing side, then that would not be something you could bring up again, because then we only have X amount of time.
Right. I get you.
Yeah.
I just want to know what was the timeline on that.
as soon as you realize you need to reconsider it. So you would ask to have it put back on agenda.
And so the idea here being sort of in summary is that on either side of this equation, we're really talking about a 4-3 or a 5-2 that would change the outcome either from a yes to a no or a no to a yes as far as something moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of the construct on that.
This is for a really, this is anticipated for a really tight vote, and so that it would change the outcome. We don't want to, if it's something that the one vote would not change the outcome. All right. So is that the role of the board? Are we all good with that? Any other? All right. Then that takes us to the role of the president. I don't think there was really anything change. Yeah, there's a big change. And this was suggested by Terry Lynn when she came. She said, "This is really confusing. I don't know what you can and can't do." And I looked at it again, and I'm like, yeah, it's pretty confusing. So what I did was just try to write it so that it's just clearer. So when we have something that comes up, being a spokesperson, so it's just the board, along with the superintendent, the board president shall act as the district spokesperson in accordance with the following. And then so the first number one is the norm, what we agreed to. So we agree to speak with one voice. Then who's the spokesperson is going to depend on what's happening. So if it's a crisis or disaster, for instance, the Bret Hart fire, we turned everything over to the superintendent, answered all the questions on that. I think that it was at that point was Superintendent Ridquist, interim Superintendent Ridquist, and so he had somebody that was the spokesperson for that. Meeting information, that could be the board president or the superintendent, and general different district information. Okay, this part, she suggested that Terry Lynn suggested that we get this really nailed down, so it's really clear what happens when a member of the press calls. So it's pretty clear if a member of the board is contacted by the press, the board member should find out what they want. And find out what they want, and then refrain from responding, so that because you may not know what the district response is yet.
What confuses me here is that we get calls from the press.
Yes.
On a variety of issues.
Yes.
We're not being asked to make a statement for the district, but we're being pressed for our personal statements on issues. So how does that play into this policy?
I would disagree that you are being asked what is the board's position on this, and they're asking you as a board member what's the board's position. So it refers to the protocols that the board's position is then told by the board president or the superintendent. And so is one person speaking for the board. I mean, and the problem is we're one of 7, and that's really what we're agreeing to. So there's one message. Now, if the press calls you and wants to know something about you, like something, well, I hear you got appointed to, a commission, a state commission, and he wants to know something about that. That's a question for you, not a question for the board president or the superintendent.
Okay, but let's go deeper, because that's not usually what happens when the press calls. What they're calling is to try to find out.
That's why the protocol is really specific as to what you should do.
But it's different when the press says, "What do you think about an issue?"
You shouldn't even be that far in the conversation. You should find out what they want, and then say, "I'll get back to you." Or someone will get back to you.
So Trustee Brown, what I've seen happen recently in this last 5-6 weeks, in comparison to other boards, what I see in this culture is that folks look to divide and conquer by getting a snippet or a sentence, and then they can take it, and they're working to create a division. Our goal this year is to create a unified front. Doesn't mean that we're all going to agree, but you all are going to agree. So by looking through these protocols through the lens of this last 5 weeks or so, could could this board appear as though they're more united by not giving that personal opinion, unless you really believe that you need to have your personal opinion out there, and that certainly is your right. So I think you have to think through, one, what this is saying and what's the intent of the culture within this town, because it's not just the newspapers, it's others also. It's a let's divide and conquer, and it's kind of working, but kind of not. So it's kind of teetering, because I think folks are really trying to work together. So that's the intent of this bottom one here.
And oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Trustee Lopez. Just shoot in, guys, on this one.
So and I see that, but also, you know, we have to look at wording and the protocols for best case and worst case scenario. When this kind of limits I see it as limits our ability to talk to the press on a given issue that maybe hasn't been brought up to the board, or that hasn't been decided on. I agree once we decide on something that we are a united front and we stick to what was decided on. But before that I think that it could limit our, depending on who's board president or how the waves are going in a certain issue, can limit or hinder our individual rights to speak to the press.
Okay, Trustee Marks.
So just to speak to that, I do recall in the past that the press had called many board members on a certain issue that was coming up for a vote on the board at the board meeting. Now, by law, we are not allowed to talk to each other, more than 2 people on this board, about any issue that's on an upcoming agenda. But if a reporter calls and asks, what do you think of that? I knew everybody's vote before I came to the board meeting. So to me, that's violating a Brown Act, and we're sharing our opinion in public rather than having a dialogue with one another, which is set up to protect us. So we still have an opportunity to share our opinion, but it's in this environment here with the public. And so, I mean, I know that I actually shared an opinion at one point. I had a controversy that was going on this board, and I shared an opinion about a staff member in public, and I learned later that I should not have done that. So I think it's wise for us to be able to be on the same page, and I think this is helpful for us to be able to work together on a greater capacity, though it doesn't take away our ability to express our opinion. I think that's what you're most concerned about. And granted, we used to have the press at every single board meeting. It's unfortunate that we don't have that now, because they would quote us from the paper would quote us the next day on what had happened in our board meeting the night before. So that would happen quite often. But I at first I thought, this is like, taking away our ability to, but then I realized, we've had problems with that in the past. So I support this new revision and trust that it will bring us together and allow us to not be divided in public. I think that's very, very important for our board at this point as we're learning to work together.
Trustee Walker.
I was going to pick up on exactly what Trustee Marks just picked up on, because it is a tricky thing to thread. And I think if I go back to sort of the different training classes I've done, way back in the beginning, one of the first things they talked about was discussing items that may be on a future agenda in front of us, and discussing them gets outside of the Brown Act, discussing something in front of a vote. But I think going back to your concern, and I'm certainly one that's done it, is that I have written pieces for websites and on state level issues. If you bring that topic up to a state level issue, and we're not talking about something in front of us, or we're talking about legislation in Sacramento or ed policy at a higher level, I don't think that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about writing a piece on whether or not I agree with testing procedures at a state level, or my disagreement on philosophy on math, or pick your topic. But I think that's a different animal than something in front of the board that's going to be voted on, that's agenda specific to MCS schools, versus something that's at a higher level. And that's certainly something I learned as far as training. But Trustee Marks is right, because if they can start counting votes, we're in trouble. And it's a tricky line to thread, but I think it's worth doing because it reinforces what the Brown Act really says and what good governance standards are. And if you're going to swing, take it to a higher level and move up to sort of a state level or policy level that isn't something directly in front of us relative to an agenda item. And that's certainly what CSBA's taught me as far as training goes. It's still tricky to thread, but there's a way around it that's reasonable, I believe.
Trustee Brown?
Okay, I'm going to have a difficult time with this issue for a couple of reasons. First of all, when I was on the Sylvan board, we had the policy that only the board president, only the superintendent would speak with the press. If the press called, we never made a comment. If we had a policy that strict, then I would have had a hard time at the tour that we had the other day, where we had a member of the press and several members of cabinet and
But can I help you with that? Because the number 2 would have been, you would be the designated spokesperson. So you could do that.
I wasn't
Because
the
on the
designated spokesperson.
On the bond, we have. So that would be the designated spokesperson will vary depending on the issue, the crisis.
I had to be very careful in that setting because I was sought out for lots of questions that could have become controversial if I answered them the way he was asking them.
See, I see this as not something that we've planned to go out to talk to the press to do, a collective, and there were multiple people there. I see this as it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm calling all the board members because I have an article that I need to write tomorrow, and I want to see how closely aligned they are, or I'm checking on this agenda item, and I want to see where people are. I think that's very different than a planned, let's get together and go talk to the editorial board, or let's go and do a tour. That's where I see this as it's the cold calls that come out from the press. That's how I interpret that one.
And I think the protocol number 2 addresses, that covers your situation and would, because that, and may involve the board. What we could do is take out a number 2A. We could take out the board president. We could would say may involve a board member at her discretion, and then that way on something like that, it has that flexibility. What do you think of that? Because that covers. Okay, D2A. What do you think? I take out board president, a board member there.
That's fine. I'm good with that.
Under D2C?
No, D2A.
Crisis disaster.
Yeah, crisis disaster or other. We could put /other. Special circumstance. Because if we're having some sort of tour or something, it's a special circumstance. So we'll add crisis disaster, special circumstance.
President Newman, you might just add a D on there and special circumstance, because that speaks directly to that. So crisis disaster is going to be very different than, let's say, a bond tour.
Okay.
But special circumstances really only happen a handful of times. So
Right.
you go to the editorial board on, in this case, it's the bonds, or the editorial board on, let's say, a new program that's coming up. I don't know. But I think special circumstance could be a D.
Yeah, and then it would be the exact same words of A, but it would involve a board member. Yeah.
Well, then you got like the freedom to run.
Well, and yeah, it could be designated by the superintendent. So. All right. Any other discussion on this? This is a first read. And number 4 covers any sort of situation. It's basically not just the press. When speaking on behalf of the district or the board members have an obligation to adhere to agreed upon key messages. So that's like, we're out in the public, we're talking about we're talking about we've agreed. It's a great example. We've agreed, we've put the bond on the ballot. We've agreed, that that's something we needed to do. And so when we're out in the public, we agree there's a bond on the ballot, and we've agreed on an agreed upon key message, which is, we'd like your vote. I mean, that would be, that's the agreed upon key message. And so that's kind of that on that issue. But we agreed that as a board when we put it on the ballot, which we voted on as a board. So when we vote on things as a board, that's our agreed upon message. When we just adopted special ed policies, well, their first read, right? Yeah. So once they get to second read, we've adopted those board policies and ARs, and so that's our agreed upon. So what we've done as a board, so say that was a 5-2 vote, and you're in the 2. And you're approached, and well, what do you think of that? You voted no on the vote, the books. So when we go out to the public, and the agreed upon message is, well, the board agreed that we had sufficient materials delivered. That's the agreed upon message, because that was the vote of the board. You can say, I voted no on that. But this was what the board decided, and I stand by the vote of the board.
Go back and see the video, watch my comments.
Right.
What position is the board position?
So that's where number 4 catches it. So we do have that ability.
Which is why we miss her sitting over in the corner with the press, because in a previous life, our comments would have potentially been recorded and it would have gone out to the public, but now it's sort of a blank hole, which makes it even a bit more tricky. Because
there's people watching us on YouTube tonight, so.
Hello, YouTubers. But there was a difference when we had somebody sitting at the table sort of taking notes.
The press has the right to watch that video.
Yes, but you know what I mean. When Nan was sitting there was coverage, like or dislike it. You would get sort of a feel if something went sideways in a meeting and you lost. The public would know that, and there's sort of a hole now.
Are we better? Trustee Brown, are we better with that? Does it feel comfortable?
I'm fine with that part.
Okay. And are you fine with 3 when the press calls?
I'm getting there.
So let me ask you this. Since you have served on different boards now, are you reluctant because do you feel like you're not being able to express your opinion to the press? What is it that you're reluctant about?
I'm not sure.
Put your mic on. Thank you.
I don't want any of us to feel like we can't speak.
And I agree with you on that. There is some limitation on this, and I'm concerned about that as well. If there is something that is very controversial, which I'm outspoken on certain things in the community, am I unable to say that now? And that's where I'm trying to understand, because I do know the press like to pit me against another board member, which I didn't mind at all. But in my own personal life, I was like, I don't care. So, because to me, there's a certain population that wanted to hear what I had to say, and they wanted to hear what this other board member had to say. So, in my mind, that was perfectly fine. But they really only put my quote and his quote in the paper. But I don't know if that's what you're concerned about, is that you're not able to do that?
No, my concern would be that what the impression of the public is with this protocol is the impression that an individual who has a differing opinion would be bullied by the rest of the board from sharing that opinion.
That's not something I don't think we would all agree to. I think any one of us would defend another one if we thought that was happening, and it wouldn't matter which one of the 6 or 7 of us it was. I think what Trustee Marks is getting at, I think gets to that piece where you could go back and say, like I just said, if you ask me about something I voted no on, it's fairly limited. I'm an easy one to track, go to math, but, you know, no, I did not agree. And here's why I didn't agree, but the board said yes. That's the position of the board. And if there's something you want to change about this, then I would encourage you to fill out an open comment card, come in, or potentially find a way to bring this issue back up. But yes, I would tend to agree with you, Mr. Community Member. I lost. We move forward. But you can see where and why I did or didn't disagree. I don't think we're limiting that ability to discuss, because you can explain a vote or a position and still stand behind the board vote while still saying, yes, I disagreed. Or get beat up for agreeing on something and say, yes, you may not understand why I agreed, but that's because you don't understand the budget concerns behind it, blah, 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 blah. I don't think any of us are in an attempt to try to squelch anybody. I think it goes back to what Superintendent was saying, is that we keep a united front and we don't let folks divide us on issues, which I think is what is being used, in the sense that if you can make a crack and get us squabbling, we're less effective.
Trustee West?
I think I know what you're getting at, and I have some similar concerns. I think we all are different and we all have different ideas on certain things, and some of us are very different in how we feel about certain things. It's difficult when it comes out that it's the will of the board when maybe it's not the will of the whole board, because we all feel differently about something. So that's been difficult for me as well. However, I think there are people who would love to divide the board. I think it's important that we act as a team, and personally, I'm happy not to take those calls from the Modesto Bee, because I think things get twisted very, very easily. So I would rather not make a comment that can be twisted or turned and do some harm. I think it's very clear when we're in open session that we have differing views, and I think the public gets that, and that's okay. But I think I'm personally okay with having one spokesperson kind of be the person to address the press, and then we can talk about things in an open session if we need to, differ in our opinions. But I think it's important that we do provide a united front and work together well as a team.
Trustee Irvin?
Just to chime in on this, since I'm probably the only board member that hadn't chimed in. And I see where Chad and Adolfo are going, as well as President Numa and Trustee Marks. But, we are public servants. And at some point in time, we have to be able to express ourselves to our constituents, and, the news, the paper, but in a way that, that doesn't, I'm trying to find the words, that doesn't indicate or give reference to divisions or things like that. Where's that fine line when that happens? Because if we get in the habit of every time someone calls us to ask us something, we defer, or, we don't ask or answer, pretty soon, they get to say, well, you're supposed to be representing us, why you can't talk to me, or you can't respond to me, so where's that fine line?
But don't you refer back to the conversation we would have here tonight? I think you could refer back to the board meeting if it's an issue we voted on. I think there's a way to say, okay, and again, I think there's a distinction between the newspaper and your neighbor.
Right.
And I think that's sort of what we're getting at here. I think there's a huge difference in the opinion page editor or an education writer at the local paper versus Mrs. Smith 2 doors down. And I think you could have a conversation with Mrs. Smith 2 doors down about the board meeting, about why you voted a certain way, that you won or lost a vote, or you didn't particularly support a position, but you know what, this is where we went. I think there's a fine line between that and the press. I think if the press asks a question, you can't refer them back to the video, then I think the press needs to do a bit more homework. Because I think we're fairly vocal up here, and we do ask questions on the issues. We agree, we disagree, refer to the video. And then I think when you work with Mrs. Smith or Mr. Jones down the street, there's a way to do this that's not going to get anybody in trouble. I don't think anybody's going to call anybody out for talking to their neighbors.
And that's number 4.
See,
That's where
yes.
it's covered.
Yeah, I'm just
in
trying to
number
get
4.
across the board
We're
here. So-
only accepting just the press, and that's the only thing that's the limit here. Number 4 is covering. You can talk to people, and this is what the board decided, and we have to because we act as a board. But number 3 is the only one that restricts. Trustee Brown.
Trustee Marks, did you turn your microphone on for a comment you wanted?
Well, I was trying to decide whether to comment. I was going to comment on John's comment because I was just going to comment about Mr. Irvin's, because in the situation that I believe you started with on your thought was about speaking what you to people in general and the press about your opinion on something before it's voted on. And I don't believe we're talking about after. I think after it's voted on, you're welcome to say whatever you want. Hey, I totally disagreed with this. This is why. I held to my position. I lost. Now the board's position is this.
And that's fine.
Yeah, so that's fine.
That would not violate the protocol.
It's before the vote has happened. Then that does put it in a tough place because it's really hard for me because I do want to express my opinion sometimes before there is a meeting maybe to the press and say, hey, I disagree with this. Here's my position. Here's why. They've called me a lot of times because they know my position on a lot of things in the past. And so used to get called all the time, but not as much now because we don't have a reporter. But I think I'm trying to find the balance between having your own opinion and not violating the unity we're trying to build. So that's where I'm struggling with, because I still believe that we have an opportunity to express our opinion at some point before we vote. But if a bunch of us do, then your vote is out there. And so I have an issue with that because I don't think that's what we should be doing. But I don't like to tie our hands and say, no, you can't say this. So what my proposal is to allow this to stay in here. Let's try it for a year, see how we do. Come back in a year, revisit this, number 3, and see if it's working okay, and maybe 4. But I think that's where the 2 parts are that we're struggling with. So would you be okay if we did that and then asked to have it come back to us, asked to have it brought back to us in a year?
I would like nothing more than to avoid having to talk with the press on controversial issues. I'd love to have a statement that says, well, as a board, we just don't field these kind of questions. But I think there are times when the press may ask us something that has nothing to do with our agenda. As a board member, what do you think about this issue? Yeah, eventually it might come to the table, but am I to understand this, that anytime the press calls me as a board member, I'm to say, I can't answer you because we have a protocol that says I can't talk to the press?
Well, I don't think you can handle it quite that way. I think what it says is find out what the issue is, and so what it is, so you can kind of frame it. It's, do you think that, if it's some out there obscure thing, that isn't a hot topic, and I don't know why they'd be calling on something that isn't a hot topic. That seems to be their fixation at this point. So that's why you're asking, what is it that you want? Like, if their question is, what do you see as a future growth in Modesto? Like, something just obscure like that. I'm not seeing, do you think Modesto will grow? You have a real estate background. You've been on 2 school boards. That isn't an issue. That I don't see that as an issue, but that's not really, the growth of Modesto isn't going to be an issue on our agenda. But, we're talking about enrollment numbers. So, if you got into the impact on enrollment, yeah, that is going to be something. So, if it's just, somebody calling and getting a pulse on the community leaders, that may be a little different than a pulse on what the board's going to vote on.
But it's always going to be that touchy way.
Yeah, it is. And that's, and we are a board, as we are one of 7. And we voted on things, and there is a board, we have made board decisions on things. And so it's not appropriate to go back in the newspaper and to say, well, I don't know, or, maybe this is wrong. So, because that's something that then needs to be brought back as an agenda item. So, Trustee Irvin.
Now, I mean, what about coming up with some kind of, I'm not going to say disclaimer.
Is your mic on?
Yes,
okay,
it is.
Sorry. Okay. All right.
Some kind of disclaimer, or not disclaimer, but a response, because I've been approached by press in the past, and, and things that come up, and where you just say, I understand the issue. I'm looking at both sides. I'm doing my background and my research, and, this is something that's coming up to be voted on, and, and based that I haven't, had to due diligence right now to weigh both sides of the thing. I'm going to withhold my opinion until after the board meets, or something that doesn't make us seem like we're coming off as uninformed or.
Well, that's refraining from responding. You're not giving a substantive response. You're saying, that's coming before the board, and I'm researching it, or But if it's already been decided by the board, then saying you're going to look into it more is disagreeing with the board. Understand that.
But doesn't that go back to sort of what we just said in the previous policy? It says, look, I didn't agree with the board. This is the board's position. Right. Our board protocols essentially state that in 12 months, there's an opportunity to revisit this. If it looks likely that we can come back down this road, then maybe we revisit in a year. We've already voted on something. You had a difference of opinion, but we move forward as a group. I think we've got to use some common sense here. And I think going back to what Cindy said, let's give this thing a spin for a year. I don't think anybody's trying to handcuff anybody here, and use some common sense. You can't talk about anything before you vote on it because it violates the Brown Act, right? I mean, it's off limits. If it's coming up and you know it's going to be on the board agenda item, you're not talking about it. None of us do. After the vote, somebody asks you why you did or didn't vote, your neighbor, go for it. Press, go watch the board video. Board position is what the board position is. I think we're making something a bit more difficult than we need to because we're trying to flush out every detail versus sort of see how this works out. I don't think anybody's trying to handcuff anybody here other than make sure that we function as a unit. But I don't think anybody's going to let, even Cindy's already said, I think Trustee President Newman said, nobody's inhibiting your ability to say why or you did or didn't vote on something, but then the end result is the end result. Right. And potentially, yes, there's an option to come back and visit it, but we'll deal with that in 12 months. Right now, we need to move forward.
So in that spirit, I will move on these two, number 3 and number 4, on pages B10 and B10.6 and B10.7, just so we can move on and make a decision and see if you agree or not, and we'll go from there. But so I will make a motion to revisit this in a year, but to keep the wording and verbiage as it is, because no one made any suggestions to change it. So, and then in a year, next fall, revisit this. So that's my motion, is to keep it as is, and just this one portion, nothing else, only these 2 items.
It's just for 3 and 4 on item D. So
only because those were the 2 that we had the most controversy.
Right,
about.
We were adding some language on D2.
We always seem to agree on that. So I'm only doing this because we had some disagreement on it, and that way we can just move forward. Or not.
All right. So there's been a motion. Is there a second on that? Second by Trustee Walker. All those in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we all are okay. That's great. So then that's good. Then let's try that for a year. I'm gonna fix D2D. All right. So that takes us on. We're moving. That was on page 7. There's really no changes to the removal of president. It's just in there, so in case that comes up. And so you know how to do it. It's got to be agendized. Relationship with legal counsel. This was an issue with the board at one time. Our counsel costs money, so we need to just have, we need to be able to access them, but access them sparingly. And so we didn't make any changes to that. there wasn't suggesting any changes. Okay, email communication between meetings with other board members and the superintendent. Emailing, we shall carefully use email to ensure we don't violate the Brown Act. That's all the same. But number 4 down here, and I'm on page 10. So you see all that underlined number 4, and that is was suggested by Terry Lynn, that email communication may be subject to disclosure under the California Public Record Acts. Board members and the superintendent should refrain from using employee names, student names, parent names, or other confidential identifying information when sending emails. So we've been doing that since Dr. Noguchi arrived, so I think that it's pretty self-explanatory on that. Does anybody have any questions?
I'll ask one, only because would the exception be only because I did do email, something that was already out in the public where the information was already disclosed.
Yes.
That is a little bit different category, because then you just grab it, copy it, and forward it.
Yeah, because you need, if it's an actual post, we're forwarding it on to, and that's part of, it's out in public already.
Amen.
So it's part of, we've collected it in the record. So sometimes there's things, there's pictures, there's Facebook posts or something you come across. We all are called to be trustees of the district, and so we need to be alert as to what's going on Facebook, and hopefully we have friends and people in our community that would shoot us things that are happening, so that we aren't surprised. And as soon as we get those things, what do we do as a board? We shoot them to our superintendent. That's right. So that we have a protocol of sharing information. We don't want surprises. So with district staff, Terry Lynn, I'm down on B. Terry Lynn suggested that it was unclear whether we as a board could direct any staff member. And the answer to that is we can't, except for the superintendent. And so only the board by formal action may direct staff. No individual board member has the authority to either direct staff or take action or to cause action to be taken by staff indirectly. Now, there's a slight exception to this in that we do have a board secretary, Antoinette, and Chris Mastros, that does some things for us as a board. And but as long as those, basically that's the only exception, and those are just things that are part of our board duties, and they're infrequent for most of the time.
And we're still copying the super.
Yeah, and you're still copying the superintendent, and that's just part of. They're acting as helping her. Okay, then number 5. This was something that was in one of the other protocols that I thought was a good just reminder of being mindful of the workload of staff. And so when we're asking requests for information of the superintendent, we had some abuses by no one on this board, but prior to this, it was, and so this is just to be mindful of workload of staff and self-monitor requests. So it's not really a restriction, it's just a comment. Trustee Marks.
I had one on 4, which is just above 5, the statement at the end.
Yeah.
It was to add who made the request, and the response given will be shared with all board members.
Yeah.
I know that when I was fairly new on the board, I probably would not have asked for certain things because I would have been concerned that they would make it public, that everybody, what I was asking for.
Oh.
So I don't know if, I don't want to make board members uncomfortable and ask for information. I agree that it should be shared with all board members, but if it is becoming a problem and certain board members are asking for information on a very regular basis or asking for too much information, I could see that that's something that needs to be addressed. But for me, I'm fine if you just say
the response will be given
and just delete the who made the request. I know some board members liked having their name. Oh, I made the request, and so I know that's happened too. But I thought it didn't need to be there. Is there a reason that it needed to be added?
Right now with the current Friday board communications, if someone's asked for a requested item, and you guys have all seen this, I just say, this was requested by a board member, and I share it. And this is up to you if you want the name put on there. So that
I think it's fine not to, unless it becomes something that we need to do that. I'm okay adding it later, but for now, I would be okay if the board's all right with that, just to take it off.
Because I like to guess.
You can.
Yeah, I think this was just in one of the other protocols, and I thought, well, let's go with it. I don't have an opinion one way or the other. I just think the response, as Dr. Noguchi is doing, is shared with all the board members.
Yes. And so we'll
I
just
don't
keep
think
that, yeah.
one board member should be uniquely in possession with all the information.
Agreed.
And so that's kind of, and then number 7, sometimes I took out via email because of what we were talking about at the board governance workshop with Terry Lynn. There may need to be a phone call because you need to share names and you need to share some things. So it's just that flexibility. I just allow that flexibility. You just need to, the board member shall inform the superintendent of the complaint. So whether you decide to do it by email and keep out the names, or you call with the name, whatever. But I just took out the restriction of via email.
So President Newman, the only thing that I can think of right there, and it came to me, is oftentimes we get complaints and you just forward the complaint and the complaint's already written in the email. I think that's okay, because I mean, we got a few over this last week, so it was just forwarded. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Without an edit.
And that's okay. It's just if you get something, you're at the grocery store, someone complains at the grocery store, that's when you pick up the phone.
Right, and what by taking out via email, it just means it could be either any way you want to do it.
Okay.
And with the other protocol that we would try with number A4 being the qualifier, that we would try and keep out names.
Right.
Possible. So, but once a complaint is filed, then the name is public on that, or at least, it's known. Okay, then,
So I have a question before you turn the page. On collective bargaining, or members of the bargaining units?
I didn't change anything here.
No, I know you didn't. So I have a question. I know we had talked about this as to whether or not someone who visited the negotiating should report back to the superintendent or someone about any concerns they might have, or to the board. The board is still left in the dark. I know some board members didn't want that when we had talked about this originally.
Yes.
So I don't know if that is something that is appropriate or not. I'm good either way. If you still decide you don't want to have any information come back to the board from a bargaining unit meeting, then that's all right.
I apologize. I was talking to Mike
that's
about our white binders in the back, thinking of confidentiality. I was asking if they were locked up. So
yes,
I digress. So could you share that again? I'm sorry.
My question is, if a board member attends a bargaining unit meeting, whether or not the board member could come back and share that information with the board. We did not have that in here because we had a disagreement in the past over that particular item. So I don't know if there's something that we should say, we don't, it's not appropriate, which is okay if that's the reasoning behind it. I just, for the board to be informed about some, excuse me, potential issues, maybe it's something that would help the board make decisions. So I don't know if that should be added in or not. I'm just asking your opinion.
So what I can say that I've seen in the past is board members actually, a board member designated was part of negotiations last year and found it to be a very helpful tool, and they would share information back during closed session, really to be able to have that calibration of what they're hearing and what would actually happen at the meeting from their perspective. So I found it to be a very useful tool, and that was last year.
All right. So if that were to happen, then I would like to add report back to the board.
Well, and I think that would be covered under number 1, that the board members will participate in collective bargaining process by providing direction and guidance to those selected to represent the board. In extraordinary circumstances, the board can do what a board member at the direction of the majority of the board. So the board would vote in one member to go observe, just like you were talking, and then we would need to put after there and report back to the board.
Right. That's what
And that would occur probably in closed session.
I would think you would get that for free in closed session almost. I don't know that you have to note it, do you?
I would like to note it just because
I think we should note it. Makes Cindy happy.
to not have it on there.
She's right. So no, but what Cindy's addressing is number 2 is different. This is when there is an individual board member that's not acting on the not acting on the direction of the board, but is meeting with the bargaining units. And so you're wondering whether we could put any language that there's some duty we would agree to then share what you learn from the bargaining units. And that's different than an appointed person who's there, who has the authority of the board to be there, and then comes back and shares. So do you guys see the distinction?
Okay, so the distinction being that if I go and meet with Mr. Burton
You have lunch.
and I have lunch and we have a conversation, I'm not obligated to come back and share my lunch conversation, am I?
Not right now, but that's what Cindy's trying to raise.
So are you asking me to come back and tell you what we talked about at lunch?
No, so this to me was more of an official meeting, not a
Okay.
meeting at lunch, because I've done that many times.
No, I just want to clarify because
So to
sometimes
me,
we get nervous
The
up
way
here.
this was written was that board members will
No,
participate in the
number 2, because board number 1 is where it's official, but board number 2, protocol number 2 there, is where it's less official, like a lunch, a meeting.
Right, but yeah, I agree with this one that you cannot commit the district to a position, but I had written it as being report back there, but I don't see a reason to do that. I would like to have it in one, because it didn't seem clear there.
Okay, yeah, I think we've agreed that if there's a person that we've identified as a member of the board that is going to be meeting with the bargaining unit, they need to be coming back to the board.
Right, yes.
And I mean, just like, we have anybody who's out doing a board position for us.
So adding that back, that's what I think.
Trustee Brown.
Just a simple typo. The word direct needs to be direction.
Okay, where is that?
C1. The
Okay.
next to last line.
By providing.
Oh, at the direction.
At the direction of
Oh,
the
yeah,
majority
you're right.
board.
You're right, it is.
Good
You're
deal.
right. How did I miss that? I read that so many times. Okay. Thank you.
You read it as direction when you read it.
Yeah, obviously. And then, okay, so I'm the suggestion is to add and report back to the board if there's somebody that's appointed. But then casual meetings, that's not, if you're just meeting, if you're not there as directing as the board, then no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, visiting school sites. This was something that Terry Lynn and Dr. Noguchi both pointed out. Our process seemed to be a little cumbersome.
True.
So the reason why we had it very cumbersome and letting to know other board members and all that kind of stuff was strange. So now that reason's gone.
Yes.
And so I just tried to take out the language that made it is cumbersome. So in A, I just put and follow sign-in procedures because Dr. Noguchi had requested that. And then I took out the at least 1 week for visiting a site because that's a long time. But with the caveat at the end, board members should be respectful of the site principal's request to reschedule. So, we don't have to give 1 week, but we need to give some advance notice. And if they can't do it, then we need to be respectful of that. So it takes out that, and then within a reasonable time frame before the visit, the board member should inform the superintendent of the time and date they're visiting the school site. All this other, informing other board members and doing that's gone. So, are you guys? We talked about this at the board governance, so just kind of taking that out, and then E is gone completely. Because the initiating board member, and then Terry Lynn suggested F2 to just make that much more definitive statement, to not make evaluative statements.
Yeah.
Please don't.
Good.
So that was just some clean. She said clean up that language a little bit. So that's all. Are we good with all that?
Yes.
I think it makes it easier. Easy. Are we good? Okay. So. All right, then the conduct of the meetings. So this is number 7. Staff reports shall be provide an executive summary, and this is something initiated by Dr. Noguchi with cabinet already. So an executive summary of the report to try and at the board meeting. So That's the one change there.
So wait, I just have a question on this.
Oh, no.
All right, so I already talked to Dr. Noguchi about this. So in the way I work and the way I like to understand information and make a decision, I like to have the bulk of the information in my binder so I can process it before I come to the meeting.
And this doesn't restrict that at all. This says at the board meetings, staff will give an executive summary. We've had staff actually sit up and read that.
I agree.
And that's
No,
just,
no.
that's
I know
what
they
we're trying to
have. I know
avoid.
they have. So yes, I agree. I'm not saying I disagree with the verbiage here. I'm just stating that I just want to reiterate, one, the materials provided to the board for meetings need to provide sufficient information to the board to do its work, values the contribution of staff, and keeps meetings focused and efficient. So I appreciated Mr. Walterstorff's information because it gave me detail on certain things. I could not read the schools and the graph. I would have liked to have had that because I really like to see trends with certain school districts, certain schools in certain areas of town, because it'll help us as we have to, if we ever have to redraw lines, if it's a high school or junior high. But so for me, understanding and seeing the differences between the schools and over time, I really appreciated having the time frame of 5 years. That gives me a good, here's the trends. So we can see, oh, we're about where we were 5 years ago. We've gone up and down, and yeah, we are declining in enrollment. But it just gives me that. So that's all I'm asking, is to have enough information in there. And the graphs are really helpful. I like visual graphs. That's just how my brain works. But I'm just saying I appreciate that. So
Okay. This doesn't limit that. So
Okay, good.
on to B10 at the bottom there, being mindful of lengthy board meetings. Board members should limit comments. B10,
be
page
mindful.
13. Yeah. So it's just a little caveat, and then okay, this was where Terry Lynn had some comments for us. The procedure for items on agenda, instead of managing discussion action items and managing public comment, she thought we should make the language more encouraging. So I just took out that. So it's just it's a semantics change. It's not really anything substantive on C. Okay. So now I'm down to D. D did change pretty substantively. The board encourages members of the public to attend meetings and is to be informed and engaged in their public schools. The purpose of this is just a general purpose statement. The purpose of the board meetings are business meetings. This is just something I think I tried to change. I changed a little bit of the formatting tonight in the script, and so this was just after I wrote this, I realized, well, let's test it and let's see how it goes. This was something suggested by Terry Lynn, and then she suggested the comment, and I read this tonight, so you'll see it in italics in A1A. And then comments on items not on the agenda. So it's real easy to read comments on items not on agenda. So this is public comment time, and the biggest change here is just separating out public comment from agendized items. So it's really clear. And then H was yeah.
The F part, you crossed out, speaker will be taken in the order their card is received.
I did, and the reason why is that in public comment, it is sometimes much better if I organize the comments based on topic, and so I do that, unless because it just makes more sense, because then all of them come up at the same time on the one topic. And it just, it makes for more smooth. Yeah. And they all kind of come in at the same time, and they all kind of get clunked in a pile. So I'm not sure I can really say which one I received first anyway.
No,
that's the reality.
I was just asking what was the alternative to that, but that makes
yeah,
sense.
that's why. And so it's really to make it much more orderly. Yes, Trustee Brown.
So, letter D. Is the public aware of this? Because it's not been the practice at every board meeting.
I I have enforced this, that they're not allowed to cede or assign time to other speakers.
We noticed that tonight.
And I did it tonight.
So do we need to state that?
No, not unless it comes up, unless they try and do it. No, you can't do that. That's our protocol. You can't do that.
I was going to recommend the same thing, that maybe within your speech, that at least until it becomes precedent, we let people know that within your opening speech.
I do say at the beginning, I do say that only one, you will only be allowed to speak once, and each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. So I do say that, and so that covers, you can't cede your time and you can't assign your time, because you only get 3 minutes, and that's it. Like I said to Debbie tonight, Ms. Barrera tonight, you only have 3 minutes.
But maybe you should write in the sense that until we think about this like a training.
Yeah.
As far as
Sure.
training the
We can
public
add it.
and sort of until they get used to it. And I think the response is, even if you went to the State Board of Education, which I've done, and they limit you to 1 minute there, which is brutal, you could still line up 20 people, but they're going to call you at a minute a pop and make you move to the back of the line. You don't line up with 20 people and the one person in the lead spot gets 20 minutes. You can line up a block of people to speak on an event, but when your time pops, you move aside and somebody else comes up.
Just agree with Chad. I think if we add it, at least for the first few times, till people get familiar with it, it will maybe prevent some misunderstandings.
Because we'll invariably have people who have done it before come back and say, I'm going to give my time to so-and-so, and they...
That's fair. Yeah, yeah, we'll add it. We'll do it, yeah.
Okay.
So H is a pretty big addition. And this was...
But how are we going to enforce H? Because you're going to get people making noise and cheering.
We are. I actually have written I've written a way to handle this, and so I came prepared tonight to handle it, and so with some help from others. So, and I'll fill you in later. But we've had people that actually have gotten bullied for expressing a contrary opinion, and it's happened right here. And I think that's not appropriate. Everybody needs to feel comfortable stating their opinion, and it may be contrary. I mean, because otherwise we can't get anybody. There may be a lot of people who believe on the other side of an issue. We'll only get the one side to come in here. And if we can't protect that speaker's right to feel comfortable at the podium. I think this is pretty important. And there's a way to do that. We have, the law allows us to control what happens here and to to issue corrective statements. Yeah.
Going to have to thread the needle, though, correct?
Yes, but that will be is carefully designed. But I do believe that it's something important for us to try and put in there. And we'll just do it to the best of our human ability. I mean...
If we're going to expect the public to raise their hand if they agree instead of cheering, we're going to have to teach them that. How do you do that without letting them know that it's our protocol? So that almost has to be something that's stated in the preliminary comments as well, what the expectation is of the public's behavior.
Sure, and we could do that. I mean, I think. Do you agree with that we should try and I mean, so basically, I'm asking you: do you agree that we should try and protect the speaker at the podium, if we can, and protect the business quality?
I agree with the concept, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I know it's hard.
It's tricky.
It's hard to figure out how to do it, but I do believe we should try.
If we don't, then we can lose control. Right now, we don't have anything that's too controversial. If something goes out there that is very controversial and it's over time, and although you guys had some issues last year, it's setting the stage and the expectations, kind of like classroom management, right? Mm-hmm. You say what you expect, you model what you expect, and you don't waver from that. Because if anyone comes up and says their truth, whatever that is, they have to be free to be able to say that and not feel disrespectful or bullied.
And
there is a trick to it. I agree that we need to write it out. I don't know that
it's not in a protocol. Yeah.
I mean, I think you set the expectation. I don't know that we need to start setting the expectation right now because we don't have that currently happening. But if we start seeing things move that way, then we add it to the piece that the president states at the beginning of the board meeting.
Maybe the sentence can just read something like, "We agree to all be respectful to each other when someone is speaking," or something like that.
Yeah, it could be pretty innocuous like that.
And I think the other thing that we've talked about that isn't quite there yet, but I also think that it's very difficult to predict when it's going to happen. So in that effort, as we move forward and we've got our protocols in place, then we have a couple little scripts sort of sitting off over here on the side that say, in case A, B, and C, there's a consistent response from either the board president or the superintendent that says, hey, let's bring this down a notch. This is not public courtesy, respect, manners, da-da-da-da-da. Let's get our decorum back together and hope that training goes forward. I think this is the first step to get to the second step, if that makes sense.
So are we saying that applause is never appropriate?
I don't think so.
Jeering or cheering, and it's done there'll be no jeering or cheering to yeah, it's
disrespectful way.
Yeah, in a disrespectful way. Maybe I'll modify it there maybe in a disrespectful way.
Manner.
Yeah.
Apply classroom rules. If you wouldn't let them do it in the classroom, why are you going to let them do it here?
Well, if one person says something that a lot of people agree with, you're going to hear some response.
Sure, but some of that is, we had somebody I had somebody sitting in the audience listening, and we had someone that came up, gave a different opinion than what everybody was out in the audience, and the audience was erupting and swearing at her, and I didn't hear that.
We couldn't hear it up here.
I couldn't hear it, but I was told. And because I asked, you were sitting right in the middle, what did you hear? And that made me really upset. So I called that person and apologized that they went through that in my boardroom. And I was really uncomfortable that that's what they experienced. And that isn't what I want. I want them to feel like they can say a different opinion and still be respected. And I think we need to make sure we have to control that. And we're not trying to limit anybody's right to speak. We're trying to protect who's speaking and allow differing views. So that's kind of, I don't know whether they'll raise hands. Maybe that last sentence is too ambitious.
Yeah, I don't see any point in adding the hands raising. I think, just speaking in a, not doing cheering or jeering in a disrespectful way.
Set what the expectations are.
Yeah. That was a couple school districts did something different, so I tweaked them both and came up with that.
Fine. Well, we can tweak it in a year if we have to, but
I thought that was a little too.
That's all right. Yeah.
It may be a little too ambitious. All right, we got to keep moving because we need to get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then the board members' right to comment is limited, but we may ask questions. It was, a good example of this is that time where Trustee Adolfo asked, "Can I see the letter? Can I see the pictures? Can during public comment, can we get I've asked for speakers that we don't have a phone number." To ask so that we can follow up on something, that's totally appropriate. But to ask anything, to engage anymore, that is a problem. So clarifying questions are okay. And then the board president may refer speakers to staff to correct the record for any misinformation. Then we could refer it over to superintendent. And then comments on agenda items, everything's the same. And then that's the comments are the same. Changing the agenda. Nothing really changed. So we'll do the change in the agenda. The request is made to the board president by a board member, and the board will vote on the order of the discussion action item. Okay, then nothing's changing on there. And then we've got 8 and 9, all new.
Right. I just want to make a comment on voting, just because it's something that I really appreciate. If someone's going to vote no, that they share their opinion.
That didn't work out very well for me tonight.
Well, sometimes it helps me know where the person is coming from, and it might even persuade me. But I appreciate it when board member, and it's mainly in the last few years, it's been the first time I've worked with a board that has not shared their reason for voting no. Now, and that's like, I'm floored sometimes afterwards, like, oh my gosh, why did you vote no? And so then I find out later. But I really appreciate that, and I know sometimes it's hard to share, and when I came on the board, that was very hard for me sometimes to share why I was voting no on certain things. But I felt like it was being respectful to the other board members to share my opinion.
I agree.
So I'm just saying that. I know I appreciate everybody's reluctance in that, and if you still feel reluctant, that's fine. I just am telling you my opinion right
I
now.
won't share on another abstain again.
No, you're okay. I only told you what the superintendent said. But.
Okay, number 8 is the protocol on social media. Terry Lynn recommended strongly that we put that in there.
That was really good.
And there were 2 different board protocols I took it from and then tweaked it just a little bit.
You did great on that.
Just to make it easy, because I thought they made it a little too complicated. So that's what I wrote. What do you guys are good with that?
No, I do. I think there's a hand trip because you put a lot of work into this. I got to read it, but I didn't put all the work into it you put into it.
You did great, Amy.
And I will tell my fellow board members, expect to see the stuff on the legal counsel side folded into the legal counsel bylaw that's coming soon, because I think it stood the test of time, and I think that's worth copying and make sure it gets into our board bylaws, because that's stood the test of time. But I want to thank you for the work you've done, because I just had to sort of reread what you did, but you put a lot of effort into this, and that should be commended.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I think Adolfo has his light on.
Yes, Adolfo.
I was just gonna mention that maybe in the future, definitely not in this one, but that we look at protocols on not only, because I think this talks more about your personal social media, but if one of us were to make, like, I know Dr. Noguchi has her Twitter, which for the people watching, you guys should follow her.
Yeah.
I do.
On Twitter. But just in case a board member were to make a board-specific, board member-specific Facebook page, Instagram, what are the protocols on that?
Well, that is what this covers.
Right. But I think that's more designated to personal. How would it differ? I mean, something that we may look at.
No, this would cover it.
Oh, that would cover it? Okay.
This would cover any social media, Twitter, Facebook. So this would cover any of that, because we need to have it really clear. So this would cover all of it.
Okay.
So that's what she advised and said that it was a huge problem in some of the districts. All right, so that's a first read. Do I have
I just had a couple typos on that last paragraph.
Okay. Yes.
Oh, I was just going to have, on the community engagement, I was trying to read and make sense.
Okay, I think I have an is, it's missing.
Oh, yeah.
And the and instead of board at, it should say and.
Right. And then,
Did I miss another?
I don't think so.
Yeah, that was it. Those two.
All right, good deal. All right, so we're just moving ahead to, if we could get an approval. Well,
So
we
moved.
need to go, we don't need to, board protocols should be amended. Okay, so let's bring this back for a first read and then a second read, okay? Because we don't have this is discussion review of board protocols draft. So we'll bring it back for a first read and then approval and then a second read and consent, okay?
All right.
I appreciate
All right.
that you pushed to do this.
Yeah.
That was good.
Well, I think it's really important as we move forward as a governance team that we have rules, and we have 3 newer board members, and newer, and so I think it's most of your questions that you have are answered in the board protocols. Like these are written pretty comprehensively on how to function as a board member, and so they're your friend, and they are, and so I encourage you to make sure you know them. All right, I'm looking for lights for meetings, and then let's get out of here.
I'll go very quickly. We'll just move in order. We were at the Chamber Harvest event. There was a bunch of us at MJC, always a good event. Gregory, I went out and saw Military Academy Night, which was quite interesting because the Navy Academy, the Air Force, Army West Point. I had one member of the community who was upset that the Merchant Marines didn't show up, but it was very interesting. All the chairs were full. It was a full house. It was very entertaining to listen to. There were 3 of us that took a meeting earlier in the month with the CBO discussing issues from the last meeting that came out in the board report. We dug pretty deep on the solar issues. Homecoming last night at Enochs with Pittman. Apparently they're in Modesto all week. It was pretty interesting to see all the kids get excited on the floats. And then 2 LCAP meetings. And so I have been attending the LCAP meetings. I did the first public one at Downey, and then I did the one here with the LCAP Advisory Committee. Ms. Benz isn't here for me to ask my question to. I think the one thing I noticed that I think in any per superintendent's comments, what I'm saying is all towards next year. When I talk about the LCAP as I'm looking at it as a process, was that it seemed to me that the open meeting at Downey with the students, where the students were together as students, there seemed to be a lot more feedback that way, in the sense that the students were more comfortable with students. And sometimes you got some snarky stuff, but we all got teenagers. But when we got here and we got to the LCAP advisory meeting, which is a bit more tighter, and then everybody was grouped in tables together, and the students were with adults, I didn't seem to think the students were interacting as much as I saw at the other meeting. And I was going to ask her about that, but she's playing volleyball tonight. But it's just an observation of the process. I'm taking notes, I'm watching, and I'm behaving. I'm on my observation table. I don't think I've asked anybody anything except after the meeting. It was only one time, just for a member of the public to clarify what their question was after they'd already submitted their comments.
Right. Trustee Lopez.
All right, so I was able to go with Chad, Dr. Noguchi, Tim Surley, and I know I'm forgetting Marla Mack to do the tours with Modesto, the Modesto B. I was out at Shackleford 2 days back to back, one with Adelante with the South Modesto Partnership Group, engaging with parents. The next day we were back out there with Dr. Noguchi with Donuts with Dads, which was really great to see a lot of parents come out early in the morning, and they got to take home a lot of donuts. So that's awesome. And then last Tuesday, I was Dr. Noguchi and I were out at Bret Harte reading. She was reading with the students at their library club, which is a great program that they're doing out there to engage parents as well and promote reading. So. And I'll be out this Saturday with the Modesto Students First group walking the streets.
Yeah, good for you. All right. Trustee Brown.
Won't mention things that others have, but the Stanislaus County School Boards Association dinner last week, I would say was the best I've been to in all the years I've been a board member. Yes, it was extremely efficient, and the speaker was right on and did not go lengthy, but was very, very direct with the message. And we were finished and done and gone. Yeah. But one thing that I would mention is that I had an interesting visit to Bayer High School. In talking with the principal, I told him of the experience that my son was having with math and direct applications, since he's right now writing calculus curriculum for college level courses, and very unique approach to it. So 2 of my kids, at the invitation of the calculus instructor, came and spoke to a group of students at lunchtime, and then were invited to stay and speak at the robotics club or robotics class. Just really fun to see the students engaging with young people who are using math in their professions. So real fun experience.
Trustee Irvin.
The only other, I did go to the Harvest Luncheon and the School Boards Association meeting as well, but I also was over at Davis High School meeting with the Language Institute students and the teacher, former coordinator out here about the Language Institute. So it was interesting and, you know, informative meeting.
Good deal. All right. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Oh, wait, no, not adjourn. We got to see if there's any items that we want to put. Future agenda items. Cannot forget that. Anyone? No. Okay. Now I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. All right. Trustee West and seconded by Trustee Marks. We're good.
Okay.
Wait, where's Chrissy?
Right there.
Okay.
Here, she's out the back.